I can ask you to please come to the table and take your seats so we can begin. Mayor Daw. Mr. Clerk, the time is 7:01 p.m. on Tuesday, December 5th. I'd like to call this General Committee meeting to order. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? You'll note that there's an additional item. We have a delegation this evening. Moved by Mayor Daw, seconded by Councillor Maracas. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Approved. Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Before we begin with our first delegation this evening, I'd just also like to say a special welcome. We have some guests with us this evening from Niagara College. We'll let them introduce themselves when they come to the podium later for the presentation. First up is a delegation, Nancy Everly Brown, regarding the preferred design for the Library Square. I assume Nancy's appearing before us as chair of the Library Board. Nancy, you have 5 minutes. Please state your name.
Mayor Daw, members of council, town staff, and guests. My name is Nancy Everly Brown, and I'm the chair of the Aurora Public Library Board. I'm here to present our views on the views of our board regarding the proposed plans for Library Square. Our board is in full support of moving forward with the development of Library Square, and we were very excited after viewing the presentation made by the Planning Partnership. After careful consideration, we are strongly in favor of Concept 1, with a slight modification. Parking is an ongoing issue in that area. Our staff park on the surrounding streets to free up parking spaces for our customers. We currently have 2 accessible parking spots right outside our door, and there is a demand for more. With seniors and young families being strong users of the library, we have to ensure that our customers are able to access the library with relative ease. Concept 2 does not provide for either of these, with fewer total parking spaces than we currently have, and all of them further from the door. The idea of moving the entrance to the current Lebovic room still does not put the accessible parking right at the door and would necessitate a very costly renovation to the entire first floor of the library, moving our shipping and receiving offices. This plan would also eliminate the use of the Lebovic room as programming space. Concept 1 leaves the accessible parking in the loading dock where they currently are. We would strongly recommend excavating the entire parking lot, adding a basement entrance to the cultural center. This would permit a U-shaped underground parking lot with easier and safer access, as well as additional parking spaces. This may cost a little more now, but would be a wise investment for the future of Aurora. The public square could then be built above this parking lot with an additional entrance to the library on the 2nd floor, as shown in the Concept 1 drawings as a glass structure with a clock on top. This not only provides a more welcoming and open entrance to the library, but also connects the library directly to the square. This raised placement of the town square creates a friendlier, more welcoming space, as the Cultural Centre building would not be 3 stories high as it would be in Concept 2. The square would be warmer and sunnier, extending the usability of the space into the spring and fall. With the additional parking lot north of the proposed new building, there would be more parking spaces than there currently are, better suited to serve 4 event spaces: the library, cultural center, town square, and the new building. There's only one chance to get this right. We all want a thriving public library and a vibrant town square. Concept 1, with additional underground parking, offers the potential of achieving both. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I may have a motion to receive and refer the comments of the delegation to item R1. Councillor Gartner, Mayor Daw, any comments? Or Nancy, if you don't mind coming back. Any questions or comments for the delegate? Councillor Gartner.
Hi, thanks for coming. So the excavation would allow the same configuration basically as we have now. People would drive in from church, circle around, drop off books, and then
driving in from Victoria and then coming down a ramp, as
Right.
is shown in Concept 1, into the parking area closest to the library, and then a U around beside the cultural center and back out the ramp.
So basically as it is now?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me, do you know how many parking spaces are there in the upper tiered level of that? Okay, sorry,
believe
no,
we'd have to
unfair
ask the
question.
planners
Unfair
that, yeah.
question. Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nancy. You did a great job of presenting. My question is, you mentioned that the lowered option would take away from the use of the Lebovic room, and can you extrapolate why that option would take away that space?
Nancy?
If we have the only parking up north of the proposed new building, and then there was an option where you had a little lower lot that had the accessible parking and a few spots for dropping people off, you'd have to move the entrance to the Lebovic room. You'd have to reconfigure the whole main floor of the library, because behind the shipping and receiving door, there's a set of offices where the books are received, processed. That can't be in the Lebovic room and then still have a lobby cutting it off from the working part of the library. You'd also have to move the information desk, the checkout desk. The whole floor would have to be reconfigured to a new entrance.
Okay, thank you.
Kim. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for, this is all moving incredibly quick, so I just got to understand with the concept, I mean, the parking and receiving is fine as it is right now,
Yes,
because that's the way it was designed.
yes.
So we have brought forward a design that would only consider the space between the library and the cultural center, so naturally that's going to affect what has been established there. The concept one, which is the one you prefer, will not affect that entrance and receiving.
Correct.
But if the one that's recommended is concept 2, so now there is a reconfiguration inside, which would bring it to the north of the building.
I understand that. Yeah, that's one of the options, that you'd move the shipping and receiving, and you'd have to move the door to the Lebovic room.
And so this is what you're saying, that everything would have to be reconfigured if
Yes.
that was the way.
Yeah, so there'd be
Oh,
great expense in the inside reconfiguration of the library that isn't necessary. That money could be used towards doing concept 1 and excavating the other half of that parking lot as well.
As I recall, the library board had come before us with expansion plans as a consideration for your strategic plan. I believe it was under that, where the Lebovic room and the Magnus room were going to be a second floor on top. There's a little gap in between those two rooms, which is actually just behind the snack bar that is currently there, and that would create some of the space that you require.
Our facility needs assessment is what I believe you're referring to.
Okay,
And
thank
that
you.
says that the library should, before they consider building another library, that they should use all the available space, as in taking over the Magna and Lebovic rooms, which we have done, and also the Pine Tree Potter space in the basement. So to use everything we've got before we consider expanding. So if we were to do concept 2, we would lose that programming space in the Lebovic room. We'd also lose that sort of cutoff of those two rooms, so you couldn't have a group using that room that was there after 9 o'clock, because it would then become part of the library. You'd have to close it all down at the same time.
Exactly. So to move ahead with this great idea, we have to understand all the sort of cascading effects that are going to take place, and it's going to require a lot of money, a lot of disruption, being able to deliver. I mean, that has to be very clear in my mind, and it is. But I appreciate just discussing it. The other point is that as we look long-term, and we see needs and growth, and we're going to be in the construction mode anyways, reconfiguring and stuff, I mean, I think it would be prudent of us also to consider the facility report of facility needs that you had already mentioned. Do the whole, like, don't do one and then come back and do the expansion as, or like do it all at once is sort of my thought. So I think that's something that we should be considering in our decision-making as well. I'm not saying I'm for one, but I do know that if there is construction and materials being moved and reconfiguration, we should also be weighing in very heavily on what you have brought forward with the facility needs. And it's all coming out of the taxpayers' money, and it's all being done. It's sort of like paving a road and then going back to put in a pipe after. You should have done it while you were resurfacing, sort of idea is my concept.
We have interior renovations planned right now that we've put on hold because of this, because there's no point going ahead with that until we know what's going on with the inside of the library.
And I think what we really have to do is, and as you said, we're going to do it. Let's do it right, and not be in such a haste, and not consider all the things that you're bringing forward. And I'm sure there's other people that would like to bring their point of view forward as well as we go forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Nancy. Nancy, thank you for coming. We had a conversation previously, and during that discussion, we mentioned that this might be a very opportune time if once we do pick one of the concepts that moving forward, that the library could look at doing some upgrades within the work that we do within Library Square. And so I agree with some of the comments that I think that this is an excellent time for those upgrades to happen, and we can utilize the fact that we are going to be redeveloping the area. So, but I just wanted to, you mentioned that the library board and the library itself are excited about moving forward with
Very
this,
much so.
and for us to redevelop the area and
Yes.
basically pick one of the plans, but you prefer one over the other. Is that correct?
Yes, we're very strongly in favor of concept one. We're excited about the idea of having the library open directly onto the public square, looking at perhaps reconfiguring some of the second floor space so that it looks over the square. It adds programming space to the library as well. So we're looking forward to it. We're just very concerned about the parking for our customers.
Well, definitely, and it's great to hear that you guys are excited about the project, so thank you.
Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Nancy, for coming. We too have had discussions, and thank you to Jill and Reno from the board for being here as well, and Greg. You mentioned loss of the use, I'm sorry, the Lebovic or the Magna Room?
Lebovic.
I'm not sure I follow why that would be if you went with, I'm sorry, option two, which is no parking.
Option two has the alternative plan that has a little parking lot southwest of the main upper parking lot, and that's where the accessible parking is, and that's supposed to be the shipping entrance as well. So therefore, you can't have people take books out of a truck up there and wheel them down a ramp and go in the existing door. It's too far to go. You can't pull up to the door. So it was suggested that the Lebovic room be remade into shipping and receiving.
Okay, all
So
right.
we're just trying to point out that there's a lot more to it than a door. There's the
Thank you,
whole
thank you.
inner workings of the library behind that door.
I missed that, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Members of council, I just want to point out that we will be getting a presentation this evening, and I think that's an excellent question to bring up to the architects to get some clarity on that as well. Councillor Maracus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just while we have the delegate here and she's from the library board, I just figured I could ask a specific question on their thoughts on it. So through you, Mr. Chair, Nancy, has there been any thought possibly to, when it comes to the shipping and receiving, or even accessibility, parking or drop-offs, that maybe within that stretch of Yonge Street where the front door is maybe if it got cornered off and it was specifically for drop-off and no one could actually park there for a long period of time? Was that something like that ever discussed? And maybe that's where the deliveries
We
could...
have discussed it and didn't feel that it was a good placement for accessible parking, thinking that if you have mobility needs, do you want to be getting out of your car on Yonge Street and then walking around? Like, it's just not convenient, I don't believe, for someone with mobility issues.
Okay. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, just would it work though for deliveries?
Again, it's not where our shipping and receiving is. We would have to reconfigure the main floor
Okay.
to move it over to the Yonge Street side.
Okay.
So that's all expense that's not necessary unless you know, it's going to cost money.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, may I have a motion to receive and refer the delegates? Oh, sorry, we already did that. All in favor of receiving? Thank you. Next, thank you, Nancy, very much. Next up, consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Are there any questions on C1, C2, or C3? Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For C1, is there any way we could defer that? Because I know that Councillor Tom is the one that asked for this to be put on the agenda, and so he's not here. And so I'm wondering maybe if we can put it off until he does come back, because I would assume that he wants to speak to this or ask some questions about this.
I'm sure the staff would be fine with that. I don't know if we have a timetable. As many of us know, Councillor Tom had knee surgery today, and so I'm not sure. He sounded good in his email, but I'm not sure how long it is before he comes to the council table. So I guess I'll look to the CAO, and is that fine to defer that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's just an information item that he had asked to be brought forward for a comment, so I don't think there's any problem in deferring it.
So for now, I will pull it. I'll put it into the regular agenda, and when we come to it, we can defer it at that time.
Let's say defer it, or Mr. Chair, maybe we can just table it at the time and just leave it, and then when Councillor Tom sees fit to bring it back at that point.
The clerk says same thing. So
Same thing?
Sure. That's fine. So
Whichever is cleaner. Thank you.
we have C2 or C3. Any questions specific to those? Got to press your gray button. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to C3, which is street naming, we have a lot of names that have to do with people who have served their country. Their names are in the name bank. Is there any way that we could have make those as priority names to honor our heritage?
I will go to Mr. Ramuno, just perhaps provide a little background on why this name was chosen and not something from our name bank.
It is.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a council-approved street name bank that we do offer developers who come forward. In this instance, their preference was to come forward with the black walnut name, which was a species of tree native to the area. It is council's prerogative to direct me to go back to the applicant to see if he will find a name from our approved street name list, but this was their preference coming forward, and we did review that with our York Region partners and EMS, and it has been approved by EMS, but it's up to council if you want us to have another discussion with the applicant.
Thank you. As a follow-up, it's a general comment. I'm taking the occasion now. It's a general comment for going forward in the future that we might want to put an emphasis on those who've served the country. And just as an aside, I think it's really funny that they're naming the street that because the Heritage Committee has just approved cutting down a black walnut tree that was bopping people on the head.
Perhaps, Councillor Gardner, we could bring back the policy around street naming and have some conversation about whether
Thanks.
it's just simply recommending or strongly recommending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Abel, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo Councillor Gardner, and I like your recommendation. I think when the applicants or the developers come forward, we should emphasize that we are growing out and naming streets are. We're not getting a lot of streets because we've almost attained fill out on our green space. So I like both suggestions. And I'd like it if the developer, if he knew that was council's concern, might reconsider.
Does any member of council want to pull this to the regular agenda? If not, I will call the vote on the consent agenda. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Oh, sorry, I should have asked first who moved and who seconded it. Moved by Mayor Dawes, seconded by Councillor Peary. All in favor. Thank you. Council, with your indulgence, I would ask that somebody put forward a motion to bring forward the Niagara College item, R14. Councillor Marcus, Councillor Gartner, all those in favor of pulling it forward? So moved. I will now turn it over. There's Anthony. There you are. Anthony, perhaps you can introduce yourself as well when you come to the podium. Sure. So, Paul. I was just going to say first there's a presentation, then we're going to have the item. I'll use this one. You can put a couple on each one. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of council. I'm pleased to provide an overview of the recently approved partnership with Niagara College for a new post-secondary facility at the Aurora Armory. As part of tonight's presentation, I will be summarizing the background context, outlining some potential strategy drivers, providing context for the Aurora Armory as the preferred location, sharing the project description, summarizing the lease financials and related financial considerations, and finally outlining next steps. I'll start with a bit of context on this exciting partnership. The town has been pursuing post-secondary opportunities since the development of its official plan in 2010 and subsequently the strategic plan in 2012. Staff have been working specifically with Niagara College on a potential business incubator and post-secondary facility since early 2016. And these discussions led to council direction in October 2016 to negotiate an agreement with Niagara College to formalize a partnership between the town and the college for a new training facility, specifically at the Aurora Armory. In May 2017, council approved a letter of intent with Niagara College that set the framework for a lease agreement at the Aurora Armory. And in November 2017, council also approved the lease agreement with Niagara College for the Armory itself. So as you can see, we've been working at this for just under 2 years, and we're happy that we're at the point now where we have a lease agreement with our partners at Niagara College. Now, in terms of some of the strategy drivers, this partnership is predated by significant policy drivers that directly relate to the town's strategic plan, as well as consultation that's been done around the Aurora Promenade. With respect to the strategic plan under the economy goal, Objective 1, there are a number of action items that really directly relate to this project. The first speaks to the development of plans to attract businesses that promote employment opportunities for our residents. It also speaks to assessing the feasibility of a research and innovation center to promote the commercialization of technology in business. The need to actively promote and support a plan to revitalize the downtown, which this project definitely has the potential to do. And finally, more directly, assess opportunities to partner with a college or university to establish a satellite facility in Aurora, which is essentially what we're proposing here today. Furthermore, with respect to the strategic plan under the economy goal, now specifically under Objective 2, there are, again, a number of action items that relate to this project. Working with community partners to promote local employment practices and opportunities for local businesses and residents, identifying roles that the town can play to support small home-based businesses in Aurora, which this type of business incubation type facility definitely has the potential to do. Attracting businesses that are green, clean, and knowledge-based. This is, again, aligns very well with that. And finally, investigating opportunities to encourage the creation and mobilization of knowledge in the local economy, again, aligning very well with what's being proposed today. There's also very strong alignment with our economic development action plan and the town's Library Square consultation and repurposing study. More specifically, the economic development plan around a business incubator, which is a key pillar of that plan, and through the Library Square consultation and the repurposing study consultation, some specific uses around a microbrewery, a winery, and a community clubhouse were identified through that process, which we feel aligns very well with, again, what's being proposed today. So the following slide outlines the potential partnership parameters for this project. I won't take a ton of time to read through this. There's a lot of text on this slide, but we have Craig with us today that's going to be providing some context on Niagara College. But really, I wanted to include this for both council and the public, really to get a sense of what this partnership means in terms of the project parameters and description. Through our discussions with Niagara College and other post-secondary partners over the years, a number of characteristics were identified as key contributors to the success of this type of facility. Things like access to transit, retail and urban amenities, access to complementary knowledge centers such as the Aurora Cultural Center, the Public Library, and the York Region Small Business Enterprise Center, close proximity to ancillary partners such as the local school boards, private schools, complementary businesses, and the Chamber of Commerce are all seen as key factors with respect to seeing success at this type of facility. And early in this process, we toured Niagara College through a number of various facilities in Aurora, probably 8 or 9 different sites, some in the downtown core, some along our employment lands facing the Highway 404, but fairly early on in that process, the Armory was identified as the preferred site due to its size, scale, heritage attributes, and location. So some details around the lease financials. So this is a 5-year lease that the town has engaged with Niagara College on. The lease represents market value. The market value for this property is $315,000. We went through a fairly extensive process of determining market value, doing multiple appraisals, and this value is at the higher end of that of the values that we got through that process. But we also have a payment schedule that sees Niagara College paying 25% of the market value in year 1, 50% of the market value in year 2, 75% of the market value in year 3, and then full market value in year 4 and 5 of this agreement. The town will also be providing Niagara College with fees for the duration of the lease, and they're outlined on the slide as well. We're paying a commitment for services, so part of this partnership for us is ensuring that community uses continue to stay in the facility, and part of how we're going to achieve that is by committing to services within the community and controlling some of that potential community use through our own commitment. And so we have committed to $75,000 in year 1 and well, through the entire lease essentially, but we do have the option in the lease agreement to reduce that by up to 50% after year 1, just to ensure that we're aligning our services with our commitment. We don't want to have unused commitment as part of our financial obligations at this facility with respect to the use of services by Niagara College. So setting the context for some of these financial some of the financials in the lease agreement, just wanted to provide some considerations with respect to post-secondary partnerships. So when considering the lease financials, the following factors were considered. 1, the Armory requires significant investment to accommodate any potential use, regardless of whether it's Niagara College or some other potential use. And when we began the exercise of designing the Armory, we really decided to focus on community space rather than creating space specifically for Niagara College. Niagara College's alignments, again, align really well with the requirements of a traditional municipal facility, and we believe that, we hope that this will be a long relationship with Niagara College, but if that doesn't materialize for whatever reason, we believe that the facility can seamlessly transition back to a municipal facility. The proposed fee structure considers risk associated with the facility, particularly at the front end, as well as an anticipated ramp up for the facility as Niagara College enters the market and begins to understand the market and potentially some of the program offerings that could fit here. The fee structure also acts as a commitment for access to the facility and related catering services to support the ongoing community use for that facility, which I described a bit earlier. The town is not required to provide any additional financial incentives. Typically, when municipalities are partnering with post-secondary facilities or post-secondary institutions on facilities in their municipality, there are significant financial contributions made by the municipality, and this is essentially what our commitment is. And the operations of this facility will be funded by Niagara College, so this is not, they're not receiving additional funding from the province to make this facility a reality. So with respect to next steps, the building itself, we have conceptual designs and we're now moving towards detailed design. And with that comes consultation, both with the Heritage Advisory Committee and the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We're looking at community stakeholder information sessions with Niagara College. We're going to begin work on the removal of hazardous materials and interior demolition work as soon as we can, with the intent that we'll have detailed design completed by the end of the first quarter and have the renovation complete with the initiation of the lease, hopefully by the end of the year. But again, we're still in conceptual design, moving towards detailed design, so we'll have to provide additional details on timelines and updates as the project progresses. So with that, I'll move on to the, I'd say, more exciting part of the presentation with Craig Udale from the Canadian Food and Institute to provide a bit of information on Niagara College.
Thank you, but before we move on to Craig's portion of the presentation, perhaps I'll ask Council's indulgence to waive the procedural bylaw so that we can remove the 10-minute time limit on presentations. So I think Anthony took up all of Craig's time already.
Sorry. Believe it or not, I was trying to be brief.
Moved by Mayor Daw, Councilor Maracas. All those in favor? So carried. Craig, by all means. Council, you should know that Craig did mention to me earlier that he feels obligated because it's Niagara College, that there will be a quiz later, so you might want to take notes as he proceeds.
I'm just going to wait for my my AV. Am I okay? Can you hear me okay? Do you want me to raise it a little bit? I know I'm a tall guy, so. Yeah. This guy? Ooh, height. It says, anyway, that's good. Wow. Greg, we need one of these, eh? Just so you know. Okay. This is a rare moment for me. Just let me soak it in for a sec. Okay. Mayor Daw, Council, guests, thank you very much for having me here today. On behalf of my president, Dr. Dan Patterson, I'd like to present to you a little bit about Niagara College and the Canadian Food and Wine Institute and a few comments on our exciting project. Before I start, I have a few of my colleagues with me tonight, and I would like to introduce them that have traveled with me from Niagara that are a key part of my team and our college, and I'd like to recognize them, and I'll start with, I'll start high. I'll go with my Vice President, Greg Medulin, our Vice President of External Relations. Next to him is my Associate Dean, Gary Torville, in charge of all our programs at the Canadian Food and Wine Institute. Next to him is Sarah Scott, in charge of our dining room and food and beverage managing for our benchmark and catering services. Next is Jeff Steen, who has been a key person in moving this project forward and in charge of our corporate training and external relations at CFWI. And last but not least is our chef of our benchmark and catering services, Chef Alex White. So thank you for coming with me. I'd like to start by just quickly giving you a presentation on what Canadian Food and Wine Institute is. As you all know, the college system is 50 years old this year, and Niagara College was part of that initial concept in '67. But since then, Niagara College has really grown to have a unique place in the educational world, not only in Ontario and Canada, but around the world. And as part of that, the college itself developed the Canadian Food and Wine Institute officially back in 2010, which is really a part of the history of the Niagara College. The culinary program is over 40 years old and has established itself as one of the leading programs in this country and in the world. And added to that, since 2000, we added the wine program. In 2010, the Brewmaster program, followed by our baking pastry program. We have a culinary innovation and food technology program, which deals in food research and development. And literally breaking ground tomorrow morning is on our distillery, and we'll be starting Canada's only artisan distilling program. This is the only place in the world where all these educational opportunities are available in one spot. At CFWI, we really focus on 4 key pillars that I think really tie in not only to the strategy of our college itself, but I think this project. And that's looking at academic excellence, working with our community and community leadership. We take our role wherever we are, working with our community as being very important. The global opportunities are an opportunity to expand beyond our region, and developing incubators in R&D. So quickly in our programs, you'll see we have a variety of programs in our culinary program: wine, beer, culinary innovation, and soon-to-be artisan distilling. These range from 1 to 3-year programs, and these are all our full-time certificate and diploma programs that we offer at the Canadian Food and Wine Institute. In our culinary programs, we are one of the world's best programs. We represented Canada at the Culinary Olympics in 2016 and continue to be recognized across the country as one of the leading culinary program, and has been the cornerstone of CFWI for literally decades. Following close behind that is our viticulture program. We have Canada's only teaching winery and teaching program, so everything from learning how to drive a tractor, working within the vineyards, and hands-on production of wine, the only place in Canada that exists, and proud to be having our 17th year in that particular program. And as I think a lot of people have recognized most recently, starting in 2010, we started the brewing program at the school. This particular program has obviously reached a lot of recognition within Ontario. The craft brewing industry has exploded in Ontario. When we started developing this program in 2008, there was 38 breweries in Ontario. We will pass the 300 mark this year and continue to grow. In Canada, there will be close to 5,000 breweries by 2020, and that will also continue to grow. So this is a market share of breweries that is continue to expand and grow within our industry. Sorry, that's 500, not 5,000. I think I'm living in the States, I think. It sounded good though, didn't it? Just a couple points of our brew program. We were recently featured in the front page of the Globe and Mail, talking about how we're changing the landscape in education and brewing in Ontario and across the country, and recently named as the top brewing school in North America at the U.S. Beer Championships last year in 2016. 2 other elements that are really important. Our Culinary Innovation Food Technology program is unique in Canada. Mirrors a lot of the development at Guelph University in developing people for food research and food and product development, and incubating ideas from the farm to the store shelf. And we have a unique 3-year program in that area. And speaking globally, we have people teaching around the world. We travel around the world and bring what we call our Niagara DNA to as many spots in the globe as we can, from teaching down in Ecuador and Chile to traveling with our culinary teams around the world, both in Europe and Asia and South America, and working closely with culinary professionals around the world and learning from them as well. And our food and beverage, we have the 5th top food research division in colleges across the country, and continue to grow that area and work as hard as we can to develop businesses, both small and medium enterprises within our region across Ontario and Canada, specifically in the food and beverage area. And this continues to grow and develop. And a recent development for us, and this is what we hope to bring to, at least in part, to Aurora, is what we call our Expert Edge corporate training strategy. And this is to bring all that roundness of education that I just mentioned and put it into a package that's accessible to the average individual, which we call enthusiasts, kind of a cool name, but those that simply just want to learn about our business, and to be able to offer training to them on a short-term basis. But we also want to access the industry professional to be able to provide training for them, and also look at our corporate world and how we can use food and beverage as a way to do things like team building, corporate training, and development for their area within the expertise that we know. This particular area is something that we've recently developed through Jeff Steen and in our corporate training area to work with our community as much as we can, but we're also reflective of what the community wants. So this particular program is about working with our everything from our local industry leaders to the public within our community to be able to bring the kind of training that they want to see and to be able to literally customize our world to them. And that's part of what we hope to bring to this Aurora project. I just want to mention this, and this is sort of part of our mandate, and we really feel strongly about this. And I had a short conversation with Councillor Abel about this, and we talked about how food and beverage is always looked at as a job or a stepping stone to maybe something else in the future. But we feel really strongly that food and beverage is a career, it's a life. It's an important part of all our lives, just in day to day, but also for young individuals that are looking to develop careers and move forward in the world, and that we look at what we do at the Canadian Food and Wine Institute as a really important stepping stone to a great career and a great fulfilling life. So all our programs, whether they're a day or whether they're a week or whether they're 3 years, we have that same philosophy every time we see a student. Now I wanted to show this honestly cool video really quickly. We are very much about supporting our local farmer, our local supplier. We are very cognizant. We have a horticulture and environment program at the college, and we work very closely with them. On our campus, if you had a chance to visit, we do have an incredible vineyard, hop yard. We're the only beekeeping program in Canada. We have 30 hives, which we harvested over 2,000 pounds of honey this year. But we also have incredible vegetable gardens, greenhouse capacity, and we ensure that all the students that work with us at CFWI understand the value of where things come from, where food comes from, and not only the product itself, but the people that spend a lot of time and energy to produce that product. So we developed a project a few years ago where I was asked to do a salad course for a huge outdoor event for 900 people. And my concept was to work with our horticulture department, and we actually planned all 37 things on the salad. We grew from seed on campus. So everything for that salad for 900 people was developed by our team. And I wanted to show you a quick time-lapse video of what that looked like. We had to have Basil the cat in there, that's very important. It's kind of like your dad's fishing story. It said 800, I said 900. If I do this presentation next week, it'll be 1,000. It'll just keep going up and up. So, one thing before I quickly get to the project to say a few words is that recently CFWI was recognized by the Canadian Museum Association as one of Canada's leader in the culinary field. And we partnered up on a national cookbook available through the Canadian Museum Association where they compared famous Canadian artists over the 150 years with chefs of today. And so of all the choices they had, they chose us to be part of the book. There's an entire chapter dedicated to the Canadian Food and Wine Institute. We were able to pair up with famous artists, and in this particular book, I got to have my recipe beside Tom Thompson, who's a personal hero of mine, and it was a really amazing opportunity, and we were excited to be a part of it. But just one way we're able to sort of bring who we are across the country. This particular project that you see some of the images here, and I just want to make a few comments about this, is that from the moment that we met Doug and Anthony from the town and had a chance to meet council and Mayor Daw and sort of discussing, is that this is not about a business proposition for Niagara College. This is about a partnership. We have a keen strategic plan of our own to be able to bring our unique expertise beyond Grimsby, as we say, and to sort of go not only regions around Ontario, but we hope to see ourselves in other provinces and even around the world with our training. We feel that strongly about the expertise that we have. And when we first started talking about the opportunity here in Aurora, it really fit with our own strategic opportunity to provide the expertise that we have and work within a new community, meet new people, work within the agriculture and business community within the region, and to be able to bring our particular brand of expertise to the community. This is about partnership and a two-way street. We look forward very much to working with the town, with all its community leaders, with various community groups, and looking for opportunities that we've been able to develop a space that's not just about teaching cooking or having a wine tasting, but is about community and is about having the opportunity for all areas of community to be able to have access to the space. The town provided us with many proposals from a variety of people that have ideas, for example, not only just for the armory, but for many things in your own strategic plan. And we just felt strongly that this was a great opportunity to not only meet our own strategic plan, but meet the strategic plan that you have set for yourself as a town. This particular space is in its current design phase to show you what it could be and what we hope it to be. We look forward to bringing what's an unbelievable park. Our team has been here on many occasions, and we're really excited about that's what really excited us about the Armory, was attaching to the park and being a vital part of what I know is an important center. I have friends of mine that are born and raised in Aurora, and they speak so much about the park and the center part of town and how much it means to them. And so we know and really feel strongly about the importance, and we want to make sure that the building connects to the town, connects to the park. The facility itself, we also wanted to make sure that it was as open-minded and multi-purpose as possible. So certainly we have a variety of expertise that we'd like to bring, but we're also open to ideas, concepts, and input, and to be able to bring what the community would like, and then eventually over time we can morph this concept and idea to be really owned by the town of Aurora, and that we can bring what we have in Niagara and bring it here and make it your own. You know, it's that moment where someone's like, okay, you're done, like the lights went out, you're done. I just want to close and thank Doug and Anthony and the entire team at the town of Aurora and the council and Mayor Daw, who have been so gracious in not only hosting us here to be able to show us all the buildings in town, to be able to really get us a feel for what Aurora was about, but also taking the time to come see us in Niagara and getting to know our team and getting to know what the brand we bring. And again, thanks for having the time, for allowing me to present tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And as said earlier in the famous words of Humphrey Bogart, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Council, with your indulgence, I'm going to ask if Councillor Peary would like to move it and Mayor Daw second receipt of the presentation. So be it. Anthony, if I can invite you back to the podium as well, just in case anybody has any questions on your presentation. I figure most may be for Craig's, but first up, Councillor Peary.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I'm just going to be really brief. I think I'll have more to say once we get into the meat of the discussion. I just want to be the first to officially say that I don't think we could have asked for any better partners than the CFWI and Niagara College. Thank you and welcome to town.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the delegate? Councillor Gardner.
Well, I echo that, and I thank the whole team for coming tonight, this beautiful evening. You've come to Aurora. I have a question for Anthony. Anthony, I found the link to the strategic plan that you presented was very interesting. I know it's lengthy, but could we have that for the council agenda next week? Do I need to ask permission for that?
I'll refer to the CAO, but I'm sure he can circulate the presentation to all members of council.
Well, with the report we have tonight, with the link to the strat plan, there's really nothing on it, and I think it would be good for the community to see that in print.
Sure.
And on the website. Thank you.
CAO's nodding. Any other comments? Mayor Daw.
With your indulgence, our Parks Department has prepared something that they've given to me to present to you. So a bit of background. As you know, that this area has been suffering from an infestation of the emerald ash borer. And as a result, we've had to take down a number of trees. Well, our park staff, under direction of Director Downey, has taken some of those trees and created furniture. And they've also created cheese boards. So I was having a discussion with Craig a bit earlier about a very fine specialty cheese shop that we have here in Aurora. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I'd like to present that now.
Sure.
I go in the middle?
Yeah, you have to hold it though, because
Last quick thing, I did bring the book that I presented to you on the last week. We launched the second volume. Oh, thank you. We launched the second volume, which also includes a chapter dedicated to our professors and some amazing Canadian artists that's going to be soon going to be available in museums across Canada. But I brought copies for everyone, and I hope you'll enjoy it, and I look forward to the Aurora version very soon. So thank you very much.
Council, all those in favor of receiving the presentation? Carried. Thank you very much. First up, we are going to, if I can get Councillor Peary again to move and Mayor Dodd to second the report with regards to the Niagara College. So moved, seconded. I'll give the clerk time to put it on the screen. The motion is that the report be received in for information. Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We haven't been able to talk about this, I think, as much as I would have wanted to, and I think everybody around the table would have wanted to. I think this is a phenomenal news story for the town of Aurora, and I think it's something that we'll look back on for, you know, the next 50 years of Niagara College and be really proud of. When we first hired Mr. Nadarozny, he invited all of us to come in and sit down with him and talk about the future for Aurora. In talking to some of my colleagues around the table, I know that some of us brought in lists of 10 or 15 items of things that we wanted to have achieved over the remaining term of council. I only brought in one thing. I went to Doug and I said, Doug, bring us a microbrewery incubator. That was my only wish. That's the only thing that I really saw for me to bring Aurora to the next stage of our development, to be able to develop businesses and to, foster a community and a growing community that feeds into the arts community, that feeds into the business community. That's what incubators do, and that was the genesis of this. I couldn't have imagined where we would get to from this point. So my first thanks is to Doug and all of our amazing staff here at the town of Aurora for bringing this to the town. Second thank you is to all of the members of council around the table who saw this vision when it was first presented to us and agree that it was something that we should be moving forward on. I'm extremely grateful for that. All the staff from Niagara College who've come out, again, extremely thankful for that. And I think as time goes on, the last thank you is going to be to the community who I'm sure will be embracing this completely and taking part in courses and learning and growing as a community. I think this is a really strong, bright spot as we move forward. So those are the good things. I do have one question. Doug, I think Councillor Gartner had sent you an email earlier today, but I shared the same thought. Could you talk about the process a little bit and explain why we weren't able to come out and be as public as I know I would have wanted to have been, but I know the public as well probably would have wanted to know more throughout the process as well.
Mr. Nadarozny?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Like all commercial transactions, it's neither prudent or efficient to try and negotiate those in public for either party, quite frankly. And so, as we explained to council when we first brought this forward, it was in the best interests of both the town from the point of view of being the group interested in attracting this partnership, as well as for the college for their own business reasons, that if this partnership was to be explored, it really in its early stages had to be explored in private until we knew we had a deal. Once the lease was signed by both parties, then the details were made public a couple of days after that final signing of the lease. As council knows, but I'll emphasize again, council was properly informed in closed session, as is permitted by the Municipal Act as it relates to negotiations of leases by municipalities. And on two occasions, specifically, council directed staff to proceed on the terms that we had suggested. And so, again, as these sort of deals go, you can't negotiate in a glass fishbowl when you're trying to get the interests of two parties to be aligned. And in the end, I think we did that, and we did so with support of council. And as I said earlier today with our community partners that we met, the proof will be in the pudding. When the community sees the value of this partnership and sees the benefits that accrue, I don't think there'll be any concerns about the fact that the initial steps had to be in a closed environment.
Thank you. And
Councillor Perry?
the last thing I'll say is I'm looking forward to an Armory Ale down the road. Thanks.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I am very, very impressed with Niagara College. That was an outstanding presentation. I did have the opportunity to look through their website, and it's just a fabulous college, faculty, and I can see why you are successful with that presentation. I was very impressed. You seem to cover all aspects. It's just a great encapsulation of what's to come here. The fact that we basically have just got this report, it was an add-on to our agenda. leaves me a little time to sort of formulate some comments to our staff. So I'll save that for next week, except to say that welcome. It's an outstanding. As far as the comments about the nature of how we do the process, there's always different ways that a council can choose to go forward. They can proceed in closed session, or they can make available for public consumption. My feeling is that if we were starting down this road, we could have asked a year ago for a report saying, let's go for a post-secondary, let's put a budget out, let's put some locations out, and let's invite, let's make that public. And so if we said, we've got $4 million and we're looking for a college, let's open it up and see what colleges could come. So, I mean, I'm sure any college would have allowed the presentation opportunity for a council as Niagara did, probably not as well done as you did, but you were able to, what we have committed for in the culinary is fantastic. Our strategic plan does cover incubation and IT and a medical campus and all kinds of things that are in there. The culinary, at first blush, takes a bit to understand, but I can certainly see outreaching into our restaurants and businesses to give them the advantage of all the opportunities and education that can be provided to make us probably a much better restaurant or go-to destination, and we need that here. We need a light, and so I'm very pleased to say I'm confident that Niagara can do that. It has to work for both, and you are committed to working with our community as we are working with you. And as I said when I introduced myself at the welcome, you know, I'm here to see that you do succeed. But as far as the agreement goes, it's probably a debate for another time, but we could have come out without disclosing lease or any of that going on or who we were talking to, but we would have shown our residents that we were open and transparent. We could have easily have done it. However, that's all done, the lease is signed, and but I'm only just commenting on that. It's a very complex, lot of information. I haven't even digested the lease, some of the points that were made in the presentation, and all that. But by and large, I am very pleased to be welcoming Niagara College here to our community, and I'm sure Aurora is waiting for you as well, and we'll welcome Niagara College to our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 5, it says the college will allow the use of the armory during predetermined and agreed upon times as negotiated. So is that going to be coming back to council? Who is going to be doing that negotiation, and what terms is that going to be on?
Mr. Nader-Ozny, who's best to answer that, yourself?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that will basically be a function of once Niagara College has set their programming. They have committed to doing that in consultation with the community, so that it's not like they take all of the good blocks of time, leaving nothing but, you know, shoulder times for the community. They expect it to be a space that the community can use for specific events, and so we'll work with them to accommodate both their programming needs as well as the interests of the community to use the facility, and to, especially as it integrates with Town Park. So we haven't got to that level of detail yet, but that will be coming as they develop their programming for the facility.
Thank you. And on page 6, the armory restoration cost estimate. I noticed that the contingency allowed is 20% of the total project. I believe we usually allow 10%, and the JOC, I think we got into 15%, but why 20%?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's basically a function of the unknowns that we have right now. We have not started any of the internal demolition to see what is, for example, what is above those ceilings. So we've allowed at this stage a rather large contingency to allow for things that we basically can't even see yet. But if all goes well, and if the structure is fine when we take that ceiling out and we explore up into the rafters of the building, then those risks will come down, and we expect the cost will also come down.
Thank you. And council will be kept fully in the loop as to the progress and the costs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's right. In fact, by virtue of the fact that council has already authorized some of the preliminary demolition work to occur because of the grant we received to start some of that work. We hope to be able to have a better idea going forward. Even at the tendering stage, we'll have a better idea because there'll be less unknowns about the shape the building is in that we start to renew.
Thank you.
Plus, I would assume that with any of our renovations, I mean, that tender eventually comes back to council, so we would see the final cost. Correct. Thank you. Mayor Dahl.
Chair, so first of all, thank you very much to our colleagues now from Niagara College for coming up. I have absolutely no concerns, Mr. Chair, with the process that we followed. And if there had been issues, we have our clerk and our solicitor who would have stopped us in our tracks to say that we're not approaching this the way we should. So I have no concerns with that at all. I want to point out that with the exception of one person, the comments have been overwhelmingly positive. There's just a huge amount of excitement that this has created. And I think it's got fantastic long-term potential for where we want to see the town of Aurora going, especially our downtown core. And with respect to, we've been working on this since, actually, I think 2011, Mr. Arulo had in his report 2012. And we actually had conversations with 4 other post-secondary institutions. And for whatever reason, those did not come to fruition. Obviously, the talks with Niagara College have come to fruition. So I think we've more than met our challenge for due diligence and to ensure that we're bringing value. When we purchased the Armory in 2014, I think we all had a vision. I can't really enunciate what my vision was, but this sure fits it. So I am very excited and very much looking forward to getting this on the road and bringing some new life to that area.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. For those that were part of the post-secondary working group, I would agree that many ideas and thoughts were explored. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I would just like, Councillor Marakis, just under the buzzer, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as excited as everyone else around the table, and when we look at this, I think that there's it was mentioned about the value, and I think there's a definite value to our community. When you look at it from an economic development point of view, there's many spin-offs that could evolve from this partnership, and I think the town will become more healthier and stronger, especially within our downtown core. And we've looked at many things that we're looking to do, and I think this is something that we've taken a giant step towards that what we've buzzword that everyone always uses, that revitalization of the downtown core. And when you enter a partnership, there's got to be value on both sides, and there has to be something that both sides get out of it. And I think Niagara College is getting something because they're entering a market that they weren't part of. And we're getting it because we're getting the benefit of an experienced, well-established post-secondary institution coming to our town. And like I said, creating an economic benefit to the whole town. So I think there's excitement in the air throughout the whole town. I've heard from many residents that are very excited about this, and I think we're all looking forward to it. And thank you, and I'm looking forward to a long-term partnership. So,
thank you, Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to everyone, staff, and Niagara College, and of course my peers around the table, in particular Councillor Perry, for coming up with this incredible idea, forward-thinking, and exactly, just perfection for our core to have, and just honored that we have this opportunity. Just renovating the Armory in itself and what it's going to be for the neighborhood in the area, and also, again, a destination point. But I didn't have a chance. My colleague said it all. I just wanted to add one thing. Years ago, I attended Niagara College, an event where you have your chefs in training, and there was a great 10-course meal with wine for each. And I really hope you're going to do that here, because I'm telling you, that was amazing and incredible. And I mean, you get some of the best chefs in the world come out of our Niagara College. And it doesn't have to mean you're going into that destination for your career. It can be, or it can be just individuals who want to enjoy being a foodie and doing a great job at that. And I think that's amazing. And so I'm really excited, and thank you very much for the partnership. I can't wait to see it all come together, and I'm going to be attending maybe a class or two. Thank you so much.
Councillor Humphries. Councillor Kim, would you like an opportunity?
You be
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have to, I have the same sentiments as the, my fellow colleagues around the table. You know, when we had this conversation 12 months ago, you know, when you haven't met all the players, when everything's all on paper, everything's a big risk. But we all know that, especially in the investment industry, the reward is commensurate with the risk that you take. And at the time, I thought this was a large risk, but it was a risk worth taking, and the reward would be in abundance. And now that I've met all the players and all the blocks are in place, it seems like it's pretty much a home run. There's really not much of a risk, and I feel privileged that we're going to reap the benefits without the commensurate risk involved. And, you know, a town of like Aurora, where you have families that have been here for generations and hundreds of years, and you have a mix of new residents like myself who've only been here a fraction of that. You know, Niagara Food and okay, it's too long a name. The CFWI. It's just a perfect organization that really gels the history and the people who've been here for ages, and those who are just recent residents of Aurora. And this is, it's a perfect way to get Aurora into in a perfect blended state. So I'm just very happy that you guys are here, and I'm very much looking forward to the partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Just going back to Mayor Dawes' comments, you know, last term when we had that post-secondary working group, we had a number of, I guess, industry experts that come and talk to us about, you know, where to look and how to approach this. And I remember them telling us the story of Brantford, that Laurier came to Brantford in 1999 and only had 39 students when they first opened. And over the next 20 years, that relationship grew, it blossomed, and now there are thousands of Laurier students out of different campuses in Brantford. I hope that 25 years from now, we'll also look back and also talk about how the relationship between Niagara College and the town of Aurora grew and blossomed. So welcome. It's great to have a world-class organization such as yours here. Council, seeing nothing further, all those in favor of receiving? Carried. Next up is R1, the preferred design for Library Square. We also have a presentation as well for that one. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, yes. Tree lighting, we'll be there. What's that? No, we're going to be back tomorrow. We need some sleep. So.
Marco, are you starting us off with regards to the presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just prior to the consultant's presentation for the Library Square design, I wanted to take a moment or two just to provide some of the history and context regarding the planning and consultation process that has occurred today, and it goes back a number of years. As Council is aware, the Aurora Promenade Concept Plan and Urban Design Strategy was adopted by Council back in 2010, and that defined a vision and a strategy for the revitalization and redevelopment of the Yonge Street and Wellington corridors in our downtown. And that also led to the policy document, as we know today, the Aurora Secondary Plan. The plan also identified a number of goals to shape the future of the area and to achieve the long-term planning and urban design objectives of the plan. Creating vibrant places and beautiful civic spaces by enhancing existing amenities and connecting these outdoor public spaces were also identified as key objectives of the plan. The Promenade Plan also identified the establishment of a cultural precinct as a key priority for the revitalization of the downtown. And so late in 2015, this council provided direction to staff to undertake the design exercise for the cultural precinct plan. That study, that precinct plan encompassed an area of 3 blocks in the downtown, starting from Yonge Street to the town park to the east. And within those 3 blocks, as council is aware, contains a number of town cultural assets such as the library, the cultural center, Trinity Church is there, our town park, the armory, and other facilities. During this process, extensive public consultation was undertaken for that study in late 2015 through 2016, and that included a number of visioning workshops, open houses, a number of surveys, online surveys as well as various public and advisory committee meetings, which led to, in December of 2016, council making the decision to demolish the former library and senior center buildings on Victoria Street. And this past spring, council directed additional workshops to be held with council, town staff, to review the public input from the consultation that was undertaken previously in 2015 and 2016, with a refocus on the priorities to consider a new design plan for the development of a public gathering place for the library square. The planning partnership was retained this September to prepare the site plan designs for Library Square, and staff, I have Fausto Filippetto, our senior planner here. We're excited to work that they've arrived at. Fausto's been involved since day one in organizing and managing the project and organizing and coordinating a lot of the consultation that has occurred over the past couple of years. The staff report before council this evening is really seeking council endorsement of either of the concepts, the upper or the lower square as we refer to them. My staff recommendation, and Fausto agrees, concurs with the recommendation from the planning partnership with respect to the lower square being the preferred option. Having said that, as you'll hear from our consultant, both options are viable and they have merit, but David will go through the details of both design options. And staff realize that there are still a number of details that may need to be refined with either concept that will require additional consultation that will need to take place to finalize a concept. But in order to move forward and continue on with our momentum, we really need a decision from council on the primary design of either a lower or an upper design concept, and we will come back with additional information if refinements are needed. So at this point, I would like to introduce David Linster, a partner with the Planning Partnership, to take us through his detailed presentation. I think he requires approximately 20 minutes to go through that presentation.
Thank you, Marco. Then before we turn it over to David, perhaps I'll turn to council and ask for a motion to waive procedural bylaw to allow the presentation. Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Wonderful. David, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council, Mayor Daw, staff, and guests who are here today. This is really an extraordinary moment in Aurora's downtown revitalization, and I'm really very pleased to be here to speak to it today. Building a public square between the library and the cultural center is a bold revitalization initiative that will leave a legacy for future generations. We imagine that this square is multi-purpose, flexible, and a programmable space for many, many, many activities in the downtown. A place that would build on the already great programming of the public park, just a block away. This should be a space for all seasons, for children and families. It should be a place for the everyday, as was mentioned earlier, a place even for some potential commercial activity that would animate the square at different times of the day and throughout the seasons. A place for small events, for large community events, and of course for annual festivities and for special events like, for example, the lighting of the Christmas tree that I see here is taking place tomorrow. One of the things that's really critical about this space in our mind is that it's a connecting space, and the idea of this mid-block link through this square to Yonge Street to really build on some of the initial ideas about the promenade plan, we think is really a critical factor in terms of the overall design, a critical idea. Also, we think that the square itself really must be framed by a strong architectural or the buildings on either side, by the landscape of the square itself as well, and be animated by those adjacencies. So in our mind, the vision for the Aurora Town Square is a place that links these two civic buildings, these two institutions, is a central gathering space in the heart of Aurora's cultural precinct. There's many, many things that could happen in this square at a variety of scales. We have here different ideas for activities throughout the year. This is just the beginning of a long list of the kinds of things that could happen here, and I'll speak to the calibration in terms of the scale of this space as I move through the presentation as well. That's really critical here. As Marco mentioned, one of the things that we have been involved with in the past, and this, in our mind, this proposal supports, is the Aurora Promenade concept plan and the cultural precinct within that concept plan. I think it's really important to note that the location for the square is almost dead center within Aurora, and especially relevant in terms of the historic downtown. This is a really important space, being a west anchor for that cultural precinct, obviously the park being the eastern anchor, and also really importantly being on town-owned land. And as I mentioned, we see this as a supporting public space for the park that has really does a lot of heavy lifting for the town in terms of programming. Obviously, a big recreation component that takes place within the town park, and this will be more of a cultural programming piece as we see it. And thinking about as well the park and this square and how they'll connect potentially on Moseley, linking those two public spaces, maybe even a mid-block link, and certainly on Church. I want to just clarify one thing. Through this process, we did look at this overall site between Moseley, Victoria, Church, and Yonge Street, and we looked at different options for where this square might be located within this publicly owned area. We did look at a location on Victoria, and I'll just talk about some of the positive and negative attributes of that and issues there. One of the issues with, one of the positives with having this square located on Victoria was that there wasn't, obviously there wouldn't be a change to the current parking and library delivery functions as we know them today. That if we looked at an option where the cultural center and the new community space, and I'll speak more to that building, were separated to frame this public space, then it would be framed by architecture or strong buildings, which is important, and that the cultural center would have the ability to activate obviously that location for the public square. Our big concern here with the location of the public square on Victoria is that it does not connect directly with the library. We think that's critical because the library and the cultural center, in our mind, not only form an important architectural frame, but also the potential to animate this public space, and that, in our mind, is critical. Also, the cultural center and its expansion in the version that I'm showing you here separate the function of a community center addition and the cultural center as two separate buildings. And obviously, we're moving further from Yonge Street and from the promenade scheme when we move towards Victoria. The site that we think is the best for Library Square within these publicly owned lands is, in fact, the space between the public library and the cultural center. For some very clear attributes in our mind, obviously connecting both those buildings both functionally and programmatically. The square in this location is visible from Yonge Street, in our mind, also important. It's in the center of the entire block. And In terms of the expansion of the cultural center as a community facility, it also links very nicely to that addition. Obviously, the negatives here are that the parking will need to be relocated or redistributed in some way or another, and the library deliveries are obviously an issue, and I'll speak to some of the ideas that we have around that. In terms of site considerations, a couple of key elements. One is this site slopes pretty dramatically between the cultural center and the library. There's about a 4-meter difference there. The library deliveries, as I mentioned, are a challenge with this site, and accessible parking. Some of the design parameters we set for ourselves in this process was that we wanted to carve out 1,500 square meters of programmable space at a minimum. We think that that's an adequate size for a public square here, to provide barrier-free access, obviously, increase the pedestrian connections through the site. An important idea here is a mid-block link, and maintain accessible parking and building deliveries, obviously, to the library, and there's obviously some challenges with that. I'm going to describe now scheme 1 that we're calling the elevated or upper plaza option. The upper plaza option essentially sets the square at the level of the second level of the library. So it's raised up above the ground floor by 1 story in terms of the library. So it's at so that results in a series of stairs, obviously from Church Street, for example, from Yonge Street, internal to the library as well. And I should say that if you just see on the cursor on the slides here, we also need to think about how people would move up and down through the library from the second story of the library down to the main story. So that's an additional issue that we need to consider. We've located parking at the north end of the site, a new community facility latched onto or tied into the cultural center. And then we've also located parking, as you heard from the library presentation, under the square itself, as well as loading, and I'll describe how that functions. I did mention that there are going to be stair connections. Those are labeled in blue on this diagram, and a series of ramps and internal connections both through the library and the cultural center. And I'll describe in later slides how some of those functions will work in our mind. In terms of parking, the parking would be accessed from Victoria, linked in through a parking lot where the current buildings are being demolished, and down and under the public square into a parking area that we have excavated at 20 spaces plus delivery, but there are opportunities to look at the sizing of that. Obviously then as well, parking on the adjacent streets, both on Victoria and on Church Street. This section illustrates what we are describing here in terms of that underground parking. So you can see that in terms of the library itself, is the parking is at the same elevation as the finished floor of the ground level, and that the plaza is on top of all of that parking. Just some drawings here illustrating what the site would look like in its transformed state. The large, I think a significant stair from Church Street up to the level of the plaza, which could be a quite dramatic entrance to the plaza, more of a ramp connection from the east, and then a series of obviously the open space surrounded by trees and gardens and green space and lots of seating to be programmed throughout the year. This is a view from Church Street looking towards the square, up that stair that I was describing, towards the cultural center. Looking back now from the cultural center towards the library. One of the concerns we have in terms of the architectural frame and this library facade is that at the upper elevation, that library facade does get cut off about halfway up, obviously, to the second story of the library. And then a view back to the cultural center that is very close to the grade of this new square elevation in this option. The finished floor of the cultural center is about 3 feet above this grade. So that's one of the attributes of this scheme in our mind. All kinds of potential animation there. And then a view back to the square from the north, looking across the parking lot down towards the square and that new library entrance. You can see there. In terms of the library entrance, we're thinking of a beautiful architectural pavilion that, as I mentioned, would serve as vertical circulation, either taking people down to the ground level entrance of the library or up to a second level entrance that would all need to be determined through more detailed study. In concept 2, I'll now describe the lowered version, a similar configuration in terms of the new community facility being attached to the north end of the cultural center. So those two facilities would, we think, work very nicely together. Parking again to the north of that new community facility, but in this case, all of the parking would move to that location rather than having parking, in this case, under the public square. We've also added a weather-protected awning that we've budgeted for along the east facade of the library to ensure that there would be a connection to Church Street, that you could, if it was raining or there was inclement weather, it would be a protected outdoor walking connection. You can see there a series of walkways to the north connecting back to Yonge Street, back into the parking lot to the north as well. And that's just described here in these series of arrows, the blue again representing stair connections. You get a sense of where those are and all the various ramping connections through. One of the things that's different, that's important to understand in terms of the lowered square option is that obviously the differential in height between Victoria and the square is now much greater than it was in the first option. So the vertical, that elevation change would need to be navigated through what we're seeing as a linked space between the Cultural Center and the new community facility. So that's an important consideration, unlike in the previous scheme where the vertical circulation occurred in a new addition at the main entrance to the library. In terms of vehicular circulation, I'm going to show you some different options for circulation in this with this scheme. That were mentioned in an earlier presentation as well. In the version that I'm showing on the screen, we don't have any, or the accessible parking is along Church Street, and it's along, and the potential for Yonge Street as well, as was also mentioned. But deliveries would occur along Church Street in this case, or on Yonge Street. There's the potential as well to have some accessible parking in this north parking lot. A second option for deliveries and accessible parking introduces a loading area at the north end between those two meeting rooms. You see here in B, the books would then be moved and other materials moved through the library, and there would be a need to do some further study in terms of how that would work from an operational point of view. We also identified an option where the delivery truck could park next to a number of accessible parking spaces, and the books and other deliveries would be wheeled down to the existing loading bay. This elevation illustrates some of the grade differences that I described earlier. So you can see the difference between the finished floor of the Cultural Center and the new finished floor elevation of the plaza. Alternatively, the ground level elevation of the library and its relationship to the plaza that you can see in that drawing. One of the things that this particular option does is it does create a natural series of amphitheater style seating, obviously because it creates a kind of bowl around the edges of the square. The same view that you saw earlier, now looking towards the north, with a stepped seating and a series of ramps and walkways connecting down to the square from Church Street. The stepped library, or the stepped cultural center, I should say, this amphitheater seating and the ramps and walkways leading up to the parking area, the canopy along that eastern facade of the library, and that rendering a view back from Church Street at eye level with that canopy linking down to the main entrance. And one of the things that I think that's important in terms of this view as well, is that from Yonge Street, if you saw the square now, rather than looking at a series of steps to a raised plaza, you'd be looking across and down into this square. The full facade of the library viewed from the north, or I should say from the east, towards the west, a winter view there. And the view back towards the Cultural Center from the plaza itself, and you can get a sense of that grade differential now, with obviously the cultural center and this link being the architectural feature that would provide a vertical movement as well. So there'd be escalators, steps, or an elevator internal to that link. And the view back towards the south across the parking and the public square. And then in terms of that linking space between the cultural center and the future community building, in our mind, it would be very much a public space that could be open much of the time to link people from Victoria down through and into the square, obviously tying back to a potential mid-block connection to the east. A space that would navigate the contemporary architecture of a new community building with the historic school, a former schoolhouse as well. So I just wanted to highlight a few of some of our thoughts in terms of this recommended option. We do believe that both options are certainly feasible. I'll talk to you a little bit about cost, which is one of the determining factors in my mind. But in terms of the lower square itself, it does have better visibility from Church Street and from Yonge Street, in terms of being a lower option that you can see down into. It doesn't separate itself as much from those adjacencies as does the raised option that you saw from the rendering. So we can certainly flip back and forth to take another look at that. In terms of the architectural frame, obviously the two-story library facade designed to be seen in all of its splendor along its eastern edge. In terms of the lower option, that does provide a better view and a frame for that, for the square in our mind. The lower square also obviously creates, as I mentioned, that natural amphitheater seating because of its bowl shape configuration. The costs are an issue that I'm going to describe now, and also the cultural center and its expansion obviously being one integrated facility, I think is an important factor, which actually applies to both schemes. So in terms of these are very, I've got to say, very preliminary numbers that have been fed to us by our architectural team and our in-house costing group. So I'm putting this out there as very preliminary, but it does give you a sense of the differential between the two schemes, primarily because of the construction of the parking garage, which is a significant, obviously, investment, firstly, and secondly, because of this linking atrium space that we imagine would tie the library entrance into the public square as a new main entrance. So that's another important and costly item. Obviously, with the lowered square, there would, as was mentioned, be costs that we haven't determined in terms of changes to the function of some of the library on the ground floor. If we move ahead with that scheme, although there would also and also with the raised option, there would be some cost implications. I won't go through this in detail. I can speak to these various numbers if you want to drill down into some of those. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Maracas, Mayor Daw, any questions for either Mr. Ramuno or for David? Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. What kind of facility do you envision for $5 million? Because to me, that's a very low number.
Yeah.
Based on some of the other building that we've done. So what kind of facility would that get us?
Right. So that's that's what we call a base building cost. So it's by no means a fitted up space because we don't know what that is. We're costing a 12,000 square foot building, 6,000 square feet on 2 levels, and it's essentially a kind of box that you would then determine what was going to be in there, and that would all have to be costed. So this is a base building architectural kind of container for whatever that might be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I had the exact same question I asked of Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, would you like to add to that answer, or are you okay?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree. The information we did provide the architects were to incorporate that approximately 12,000 square foot building space. It's not yet programmable, so the costs are really just preliminary on a per square footage for a basic shell.
Thank you, because like you, when I saw 5 million, I thought, well, we've built some other things for much more than that, so. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David. That was a great presentation. And I just want you to speak to the library chair's comments about the front foyer and the perhaps the compromise of the Lebovic room. So can you comment on that in terms of its validity and what we can do about that?
Yeah, so we are quite sensitive as a team to the issues that the library has, and we have had in-depth discussions with them, and we certainly appreciate that in both these options there would be a need to for changes to the obviously the operation of the library and also some of the functions in terms of the loading and deliveries, and even for that matter accessible parking and how people would move in and out of the library. We do have on my team David Premi, who's a library who's done many libraries in his or has many libraries in his portfolio. So in his mind, the issues that the library raised are absolutely relevant and important to the discussion. But then moving forward, we'd have to look at some of these reconfigurations in terms of what the trade-offs are. He's worked on many downtown libraries as well, where, for example, with the loading of books and the loading of different deliveries and whatnot, they aren't right at the door. They just don't have the luxury of that space. He's worked at other libraries where they've needed to reconfigure because of for various renovation reasons, and he's confident that the solutions that we've showed here from a functional point of view could be worked out. Obviously, there's going to be a cost to that, and there's going to be a change to some of the operation. I'm not in any way disputing that, but in his mind, there are ways to work within that, and I think the library said that it would entail changes, but that that there were possibilities.
Does that answer your question?
Not quite. I'm just trying to picture in terms of the front entrance, the current entrance
Right.
of the library, and then the Lebovic room is just north of the entrance.
Right.
How would the lowered plan impact the Lebovic room? Would the entrance be changing, or
Yeah,
if I can
well,
just provide some clarification, David.
Sure,
It's just-
sure.
The comment really was that the current entrance would need to be significantly altered under the lower concept, and that would also include the loss of Lebovic room, as the library would have to reconfigure the inside, which was kind of news to me as well, and it sounds like it was news to Mr. Kim, Councillor Kim, apologies. And so perhaps you can provide some clarity. Maybe even we can put the concept back up on the screen.
Yep. So there were two options that we provided in terms of, two options in terms of the library function on the main floor. One doesn't change the loading. The dock is left as it is today, but the books and deliveries are wheeled down to that room from the place where the vans or delivery vehicles are parked. The second option looks at, let me just go back to that. This one diagram's not too far in here. Right. So what these lines represent. So we're looking at the potential for this walkway along the north end of the library to become a vehicular entrance. Also a walkway that you can walk down it, but there would be, from time to time, vehicles driving along it as well, both from an accessible perspective and from a delivery perspective. This wouldn't be necessarily an in-out for the overall, for those parking stalls. But we're showing two options here. One is that the delivery truck would potentially park here, and that deliveries would be walked down from that parking space into the existing room. That's more work for the people who are delivering, obviously, but there are examples of where of this kind of system. That's coming from my library architect, who unfortunately is in Europe and couldn't be here today. The second option is to look at some reconfiguration internally, so that the delivery truck would come in back into this space between these two rooms, and the assumption is that there would need to be some changes to one or both or one of these rooms to provide for a new loading function and delivery function. Does that?
Okay, so
Councillor Kim?
through you, Mr. Chair, so the first option is really just wheeling it down, the resources, and going into the current front entrance.
That's right.
Okay. So it's only option B if we create another service delivery option on the north side. That's when it'll impact the space.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. To me, neither option is perfect, obviously. Instead, what you were just talking about, where you've got the B, that is kind of an open patio at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then connects to a little cafe. I'm thinking it might be a lot easier just to be able to walk through that area and deliver whatever needs to be delivered, because we just can't take away a program space. But I think that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think too much alteration would have to go on there. And trucks could park there. So that's my main concern with both of the designs, is that the public has a certain service level now with respect to parking and dropping off books, and particularly dropping off children, seeing them go safely into the building. And I don't think the public is going to appreciate us decreasing what they will perceive to be their service level. And I am also concerned about the accessible parking, because, I mean, we're aging, and there's going to be more demand for that. So I mean, I know you've thought about this a lot and talked with all of us a lot. Is there anything that you can think of that we could do in concept 2 to provide that accessible parking and that drop-off function?
I'll tell you, it's there is a natural conflict between a pedestrian space and obviously vehicles that come and go through it. There are places in the city, like the Distillery District, for example, where all the deliveries happen first thing in the morning before all the hordes of people arrive there. All of those little shops are delivered most of them through their front doors. In this case, as we understand it from the library, that's not an option here. So the delivery trucks and anything else that comes through the front door, including the book drop-off, all have to literally drive through a pedestrian space. And as many people have pointed out, you wouldn't want you wouldn't want vehicles driving around a space where children were running through and whatnot. So there's a natural conflict there that we are trying to deal with and trying to separate the pedestrian space from the vehicular space. We think that in this case, because of the unpredictability of that, they really need to be separated. So in our mind, any loading and accessible parking need to happen at the very north end of the square. We've illustrated one layout option here in terms of how that could be organized. We could look at an option, or we could look at a variation on this where there was, maybe some extended parking here. There's, this is a very narrow lane, so I think as a circulation route, that's probably the most effective. I think it'd be difficult to get parking much closer to the square and the library, and I understand that this is going to be, a sacrifice. I've got to say that in downtown Aurora, and I realize that it's a change for everyone, that there are something like 470 on-street parking spaces. There's a lot of parking available within a 5-minute walking radius. In many cases, much smaller than it's a much smaller distance than you would ever think about walking in a mall that everybody, all of us go to. And so the thinking is that we are trying to replace the parking on the block, and people will absolutely walk a little further, but when they get out of their cars, they're on pedestrian they're on pedestrian walkways, so there's not a conflict with cars for children and families, and that and that there are lots of spaces around this site as well. So yes, there is a little more walking, even from the parking lot.
With respect to the parking, residents are complaining there's not enough parking now. If we're trying to draw people into our downtown core, into our civic square, especially the new people from the Bayview East area, I mean, we're going to have hopefully a lot more people who require parking, and I know that we want to encourage people to walk, but especially not to have more accessible parking. To me, it's a deal breaker. I know parking. I know it was said that according to the AODA, that's where this is, the 4 spaces. It's just within the limits of the AODA. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, along Yonge Street, as I mentioned to the delegate, is it possible to create that as a loading, unloading zone and a drop-off pickup zone? Because I'm hearing some of those concerns, so I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think there is a possibility, and you're meaning, I think you're referring to a kind of peak, sort of rush hour condition, because obviously off-peak you can park on Yonge Street, and there's lots and lots of parking anytime I've been here, and certainly that was our observation during the promenade work as well. So it's those 2 hours of peak time that I think are the critical one, and there does seem to be space, not necessarily at the north end, but potentially in this area, and I mean maybe there is some space up here. The library does pinch in at points, so that would have to be studied in more detail in terms of how you'd fit that. And I think you're referring to a kind of parking bay or lay-by outside of the travel lanes, and we could certainly look at that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Gardner mentioned about the limits for ADOA standards as far as the distance, and I'm just wondering if you could just speak to that and say how far off we are, like how close we are to the maximum distance that could possibly be.
Right.
Maybe you can just
So in public space design, it's not altogether as clear as it is with interior building design. We use a dimension in public space design of about 50 meters or so as a kind of benchmark, sort of rule of thumb to go by, and we're close to that in the scenario on Church Street. Yes, it's a longer walk, and it's certainly not ideal, but that just gives you a sense of the distance of 50 meters. It's about the length of that canopy there. So in terms of the spaces that we're providing, we're certainly well within what we would consider an acceptable distance for accessible parking. There might be a scenario where you could drag some of it even closer, but it all begins to at some point become a conflict with the main entrance. That's the challenge with the lower scheme. Obviously, the upper scheme brings it right to the front door.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, just one more question. I know it's in here somewhere, but I didn't see it. But how many spots are currently?
There are 77, I believe.
77, and both proposals would actually up it to 80.
Yes, we think we can, exactly.
Okay.
As was mentioned earlier, if you were to expand the size of the garage, the space that's for parking under the, obviously under the plaza, that number would increase. I think that was clear in the comment that was made by the library.
Okay, thank you.
Marcus. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for presenting. I don't mean to be uninterested, but just for the benefit of everyone else, we've all seen the presentation before.
Yep.
I want to word this correctly. I mean, we have a huge issue with the library. I mean, to bank it between 2 buildings, the premise, much like the 14, you're putting it in between the 2 buildings. Mm-hmm. And I asked you in our presentation that I was with, and Councillor Thompson joined us, the new community facility that's joined to the cultural center is a given. And given that, the only place to put the square is in between the two buildings. Otherwise, you can't create a square with the addition. And so I asked you, were you given direction as to that was a given, you know, because I've never understood that we were doing that.
In terms of the space made available for the community center, you mean, or the location of the community center
So
building?
I'm asking, we're committed in both your concepts to having a new community facility added on to the cultural center. It's going to have an atrium in between, but it's
Right.
going to be adjacent to.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
don't-
so through our consultations with the community center, with staff, members around this, members in the room today, we determined in our estimation that the community center being added to the cultural center was the best option in our mind.
So,
And-
okay, so
yes.
based on that,
Yes,
your direction is therefore it has to be down there.
that was our determination.
Okay,
Yes.
so I had always had a concept, and I would have liked to have seen it, of it being up above with the community facility that we have shown here that's attached to the cultural center to be at the north end by Victoria Hall. And that way you would have two buildings, and now we don't have to worry about the library. So we're not being provided with that option.
Could I comment?
I believe he did present a slide in it. I think he's going to it right here for you, Councilor Abel.
Yes, so this is a scheme that you had, in the session that I had with you, I'm going to say a month ago or more, you asked us to look at this. I didn't bring it forward in the previous presentation that you saw, but I am bringing it forward today as an example, and I described what I thought the positive and negative attributes were of that option, and I suggested that we would pursue the other because of the negative issues associated with this option.
So I see that the new community facility is where you put it. I would like to have seen one moved vertically along the Victoria Hall and coming down long, creating a bigger space. Also, you could overhang cantilever into the space between the two buildings as you have and create a big square in that area, probably as big or bigger. And then we wouldn't have to deal with anything with the library and the entrance there at all. So I think it would only be fair for us to at least look at that or something, I mean, in a conceptual in my mind. So I just wanted to sort of get that out, why that's not going to be there, because when we do talk about the item, I will pursue that. But I just wanted to give the benefit of everyone here why that's not being presented. And I think it's fair to say that you said there are limitations with it, so it was not pursued. And that's all I sort of wanted to get.
Was that a question or just a comment?
I think I just wanted to make a fair comment and see if it was an agreement that that's why that concept was not presented.
So this was my understanding of what you were representing. Obviously, there are many potential options in terms of where the community center could be located. It could latch onto Victoria Hall. It could wrap down through and along Victoria Street. Of course, then it's no longer framing a public space. In our mind, having the community center attached to the cultural center has a lot of value. And we think that value is lost when it's disconnected, obviously for mutual programming, for expansion for all the offerings that both facilities could provide.
I'll accept that. I don't agree, but thank you very much.
Councilor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your presentations tonight, and I'm excited about both of them. I think they can both work beautifully. And listening to the comments around the table, listening to library board comments as well as residents, and when I try to differentiate, at this point, I've got another week to think about it. I feel that there's a saying that keeps going through my mind. I don't know why, but I'm going to say it. You know, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's something that keeps coming through my mind because we have a good thing going with the library right now in terms of the way it's set up. It's not a very old building compared to other buildings in town. And to see how things are set up, I love option one in terms of how it works with the library. And it doesn't take much away. I'm very concerned, and you've heard it before through the other, my peers, accessibility is huge in Aurora. We pride ourselves in being super conscious of that, and this will have to go through that committee anyway, eventually. So I know it doesn't, we're still within AOTA, is absolutely, we're still in there with both options, but it's something that I think about all the time. I think we all do. So for me at this moment, I prefer option one. I think you get the benefit and the biggest bang, I think. I understand what you're saying about buildings attached, larger space, but I still think you still get square footage and programming space. And a lot of our programs are very different. I mean, unless we change, we don't sort of have so much to offer. So that's just from my perspective. I don't know if you wanted to respond to any of my comments, but right now, again, both fantastic for me, but the library is a
Could I just be clear that by
Sure.
option one, you're referring to the elevated plaza?
The one that doesn't change the parking.
That's right, yes, the elevated, yes, exactly, the elevated plaza,
yes.
the raised
Yes, the elevated,
plaza
yes.
option, yes.
Yeah.
So I just have to say that as a team,
Sure.
we've really struggled with which option
I can
we
imagine.
supported, and we've had a lot of back and forth with our architect colleagues and certainly with staff here. So we think that both schemes have a lot of merit and a lot of potential. When we went through the kind of the pros and cons and weighed it all out, we felt that the lower scheme provided, potentially more public benefit overall.
Sure.
Thinking about not just the library in isolation, but the overall community and the town. But that's not to say that option one still isn't a really viable one in our minds. So I can appreciate that, and the challenges that the library will have moving forward in terms of option two, I think are, we don't want to underestimate them in any way, but I should just say that there are also challenges with option one in terms of that elevated entrance and accessing at the second floor and that vertical circulation. So both of them aren't
Both
without
have-
their,
both
exactly.
aren't like
Exactly.
perfect. Both
That's
are livable. And to your point about, through you, Mr. Chair, is it, just all about the library? It's not for me. I mean, the library is very crucial and critical
Yep.
for us. But I do believe without making that much of an impact to the library, it still provides lots of amazing community space, something we don't have right now at all. And I just think it's still going to be an incredible site, an incredible place that people are going to want to go to. And, if the library draws them, they'll, hey, what's over here? And if something that's happening in community space draws them, oh, here's our library. I still feel it's going to be a really great space overall. So thank you for your feedback, though. I appreciate that, and I'll be listening to more feedback throughout the week. Next week's the voting week, so
Thank you.
thank you.
Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David. Councilors, a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we were in Edmonton for FCM, and we took a tour. And Councillor Thompson, I think, was there. Councillor Maracas, Councillor Tom, and there was an interesting. It was a social housing and community space project where they had done a square. In this case, at ground level, it was a complete rebuild, incorporating some interesting features, including an amphitheater. And for those of us who've been to Ottawa for FCM, so at between the Chateau Laurier and the Convention Center, which is Wellington, I think, and Colonel By Drive. So there's a pretty substantial grade difference, and there's a restaurant there, and you go down to the lower level of the restaurant, down again an amphitheater type of affair, and the way it's done, I think, is quite attractive and builds a great community space. So I think this is definitely the right track. One of the things, and I met with David on Friday, pardon me, and we talked about, and the chair of the library board brought this up, getting it right. So, and my comment was, you know, maybe if we, and I'm not going back and rehashing where the library was placed and how it was placed 20 years ago, but maybe if there'd been a bit of a different conversation back then, we could have been able to incorporate things differently now. So I think it is really important to look at what this will be like if we can envision it out 20 years as to how that's going to fit into that area, and to start to look at what will change over that time period. And I think transportation by automobile, I think there will be a substantial change in how that comes about. One of the articles I read and bookmarked is called "The Cost of Free Parking," because we can't afford it anymore, to be simple. So I think we really need to take that into account. So I asked you specifically how we would do that, how we can look at making sure that as we look out 20 years and how good is our crystal ball, and how do we fit that in as to where things are going. So I think that the placement of a new community facility makes perfect sense, because built on to the existing Church Street School, we get to take advantage of that infrastructure, as opposed to creating a standalone building that doesn't have the same synergies I think that we would like to see happen in that area. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm quite frankly somewhat ambivalent as to whether or not we go with or without the platform. And I can certainly appreciate some of the long-term issues on the cost of the platform versus not having the cost, of the long-term maintenance costs. And I'm still working through that, quite frankly. One of the things I think that would help me, and I'm also quite sensitive to the library, because a number of us have sat on the library board here. So we're all pretty passionate to make sure that the library succeeds, wildly succeeds. But one of the things that I think would help me, and I will go to, perhaps Mr. Ramuno or Mr. Nadarozny for next week. So what's a metric around deliveries? How many deliveries do we get? So to put some feel around that, how much of an issue is, it's obviously an issue. They get product in, they ship product out, but how big an issue is that, I think would help, knowing what we're dealing with there. It does somewhat concern me that maybe taking out the Lebovic room, just when we're in the process of setting up the library with those two facilities that they can add to their total space rental capability. So I would like to get a bit more clarity around that if I could for next week, and I'll look to, I guess, Mr. Ramuno for that. I think that, like I said, I believe that would help me. Overall, I think this is the right approach. Again, I'm somewhat ambivalent as to whether or not we go high or go low. And so I think some of those answers would help me formulate my opinion for next week. But I do thank you very much for the presentation. I thank you for your time last Friday. I found it quite beneficial.
Thank you.
I'll look to Mr. Ramuno and see if he took some notes, and we'll follow up for all of council on those questions. Thank you. Next up, Councillor Gardner for the second time.
Thank you. Could you speak a little bit more to the lay-by? So that connects the square to the cultural center?
Oh, you mean the, I think you're talking about the link. I'm speaking about this space here.
The atrium.
Thank you. I thought you called it a lay-by. Yes, that space.
If I did, that was my mistake. I'm sorry. We're imagining that, actually I have an image of it. We're imagining that it is a beautiful architectural feature. You can see the idea here is that it's a linking space between the old and the new. So very much open and transparent, like some of the spaces that you may have seen, the Isabel Bader Theater downtown on Bloor Street. There's many others that I could reference if you're interested in knowing. And just a few examples that we have here of what that space could look like. I think in this, especially the one on the left here, a space that links the old, obviously this would be imagine this being the school space, and this being the community, the cultural center as it is today, the community center here, in some ways blending the old and the new, still allowing you to have beautiful, certainly views of that historic facade, and then a public space that could be programmed by the cultural center or the community center as well. So it's an indoor space. It would also deal with the vertical circulation and navigate the difference in grade between Victoria Street in the one option where that elevation difference is greater than the other scheme. So in the lower scheme, there's a greater elevation difference. In the upper scheme, less so. So there'd be stairs, escalators, an elevator linking down through this space as well to a lower level.
Thank you. As we're not building that other building right now, how is the cultural center going to access, if we pick the second concept, how is the cultural center going to access that?
That's right. So we've talked to the Cultural Center about that, and there'd be one of two options. One is that their basement level would be opened up somewhat to the square. Really, in either option, I would expect there could be a link from that lower level. And in the case of the lower square, we need to at least add in a temporary ramp, or it could be permanent, and stair down to the elevation prior to this being constructed. If it was decided to create our team has also talked about the option of actually constructing this link in advance of the community center. So you could build this early on, create that vertical connection, create a bit of a public space there to start with, and then like you'd be doing with the other option with the new entrance to the library. So there could be, this could be a similar kind of idea.
Thank you. And I don't want to open up that lower level of the Church Street School. I mean, we could be asking for problems by doing that. So I would like to find a solution that would allow access without doing that.
Yeah, we certainly could look at that. There is actually an exit out today, a lower level exit. And both the Cultural Center and our architectural team both felt that there'd be an opportunity to improve the quality of that basement space by, adding potentially more glazing and some access.
Councilor Gardner?
Thank you.
Councilor Maracas for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter. Would it not make sense, in your professional opinion, to construct the additional expansion at the same time when you're doing all construction? Wouldn't that save, in essence, with costs?
There's always an economy and an efficiency in doing projects in one single move. It's not unusual by any means with public spaces. We do a lot of this kind of work, and often the funds aren't available to do everything together all the time, and there's a bit of a cascading effect sometimes that happens. So we certainly feel that the square and the linking pieces could be constructed in one move and the bigger facility in a second, but I would agree with you, if it was all constructed at once, there'd be an efficiency in doing that.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up. So give a little bit of background. So you met with all of us, and you met with members of the public, with some of the different boards. You've also had the pleasure of looking through, I think, 20 years worth of notes and reports. And I guess where I'm going with this is that you've taken all that information, and in your professional opinion, you've come up with these two options that you feel are the most viable for this area, with all those comments from everyone. Okay, thank you. And in your professional opinion, as well as you're recommending concept 2, even though I heard you say that both concepts are suitable, but in your professional opinion, you believe that concept 2 is the more viable one and would create a more value for the town.
I wouldn't say necessarily more viable. We think that it maybe has the greater benefit for the town at large. Now I'm isolating the library in that discussion when I say that, because I recognize that there are challenges with option 1 for the library, more so than there are, or sorry, I should say option 2, than there are with option 1. We certainly as a team feel strongly that both schemes are viable, and we're quite confident moving forward with either one. But when we weigh all of the pros and cons from that broader perspective, we lean more towards that second option, the lowered square option.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. hearing about the deliveries in concept 2, are the deliveries, because my understanding is from reading this, is that deliveries are expected to be on Yonge Street within concept 2, because I keep hearing everyone saying that we would have to reconfigure the entrance, and I'm thinking that that's only an option if we had to do it, because I'm looking at concept 2 and it specifically says deliveries Yonge Street.
So concept 2 has a number of options.
Yes.
And one of the options shows, and of course the library hasn't had the luxury of commenting on this, but there is an option that our architects put forward, the architect who's worked on libraries, where he's suggesting that there could be, so yes, one option is loading off Yonge Street. Another is that the loading could come down a laneway to the north, park, and wheel with a small trolley into that loading bay, which happens, I guess, from my understanding, in other libraries similarly.
Thank you, and just as a follow-up through you, Mr. Chair, so there's a couple of options within concept 2, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there would have to be a reconfiguration of the entrance for the deliveries to take place if we went with concept 2.
In his mind, that's accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Dahl, for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick points. And David, if you could go back to that slide where you showed the blending of the old and the new. So just a couple of slides, I think.
Yes, which direction was that now? Let me see here. I think it was in this precedent right here.
Yeah, thank you, on the left. I had the opportunity a couple of times to visit in Niagara Falls. I think it was their old town hall that they added the museum to. Very similar to this, a blending of the old and the new, and I think it works really well. And it's a good enough contrast that you're not trying to sneak it in and make it look like something that to blend it in. So I think that can be done quite effectively. The last one, when we talked again on Friday, we talked a bit about parking on Yonge and whether or not we could look at creating permanent parking on Yonge. So. And I looked at it the other day, and perhaps taking a chunk of the sidewalk away so that we could have some more space to work with for dedicated parking, because it is, parking on Yonge Street there is a challenge. People do tend to speed up there, and I can quite appreciate that people would not feel comfortable getting out of their vehicles there. But if we could set that in and create some kind of permanent barrier, so it would effectively make it one lane in front of the library, and to have that option for people to park there, that would free up, or that would create, I think, a different feel of parking. And I don't know how many spaces, but I would think a reasonable amount of parking that perhaps could be used. I'm not sure if accessible parking, but certainly maybe perhaps for mums and tots, something like that.
I think that, yes, for sure. That's, I think, a viable option.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mayor Dahl? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno, if you were given the task of providing some facts and figures for next week, Mayor Dahl mentioned the ongoing maintenance costs of the sheltered parking space.
And your point of order is, Councillor Abel?
We're asking questions of the delegate, presenter. I thought if it was Mr. Ramuno, we might ask him when we get the item on, that's all.
Mr. Maruno did start off the presentation.
Fine, well, we'll.
So if your question is to Mr. Ramuno's presentation or remarks, that's fine.
If you could also provide maintenance costs, long-term maintenance costs of the sheltered parking space as well, in addition to the other numbers that were requested, that'd be great. I think that would really help to shape our decision. And as well, to your presentation, Mr. Ramuno, can you speak to the, you know what, we're going to have a chance to talk.
We will talk about the report after our health break, which is a little overdue.
That's it for me.
That's it for you? For sure. And Councillor Perry, I think.
Yep.
You're pretty fast on that button.
Just to David, with regards to, we were talking about accessibility, was any thought given to having heated walkways? We exist in a winter climate.
We aren't at that level of detail, frankly. Yeah, this is a kind of high-level
Sounds good.
schematic. And there are different, options for that we could consider in terms of some of the critical ones. One of the things that we are looking at is a covered walkway, especially in option 2, that's also weather protected. So that's another way to think about it.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, all in favor of receiving the presentation? Carried. I will now call for our health break, and then when we come back, we will put the item on the floor. Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Council, we're back in session. Council, can I get a motion to put the recommendation on the floor? Councillor Humphreys, seconded. Councillor Maracus. Councillor Abel. That was the recommendation in the report.
Okay, sorry,
Can I have somebody else move this motion? Councillor Mayor Daw moves it, seconded by Councillor Maracus. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, I'm not feeling well and I'm coughing, and the later it gets and the more tired I get, the worse it is. So if I excuse myself, I'll leave very discreetly, but that'll be the reason why I'm leaving. I won't be for any other reason. So on the motion, I have to admit, overall, I'm somewhat underwhelmed with what we have before us. I would like to have seen a third option. So, I mean, seriously, I would like to have another rendering, if not by our one that we hired, then hire someone else and have that rendering on the top. That would alleviate everything that the library is concerned, and it just gives us an option to look at for our public to have a look at. So that would be my preferred option, is to have a concept drawing with the new building at the north end enveloping the Victoria Hall. So I'd like to put that on the table.
That would be contrary to the motion that we have on the floor. Councillor Abel.
An amendment that we exercise for a third one? Do we have to defeat this before we can go there?
Well, it sounds like what you're asking for is staff to go out and hire another company to produce a third drawing, which I would think would be contrary to the motion on the floor, but I'll go to the clerk for clarification.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a non-contrary way, if you'll take that, would be a referral back to staff to present more options to council.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, I'd like to put that forward.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Abel's motion to refer to staff? Seeing none, the motion fails. Councillor Abel, the floor is still yours.
Well, we really have some challenges with either concept. I think first and foremost is the parking, and secondly is the grade. And that's why I think we would want to consider another option. And I don't want to support either. But if I had to vote, I would vote for what the library recommends. And the library recommends the one with the deck, and for just obvious reasons. I appreciate what professional opinions we're getting, but the library is really the gem, is the biggest part of this whole exercise. And we have our professional director coming forward and saying that's the one she prefers. So I would have to support that concept, the one with the ramp, and I believe that would be option one. So I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Perry?
So I came into this meeting with option one being my preferred option. To be honest, I see the pros and the cons to each of the options in front of us. I think the library's brought up some interesting points that I think we need a little bit more information on, and I hope that we'll be able to get that by next Tuesday when we make our final decision. I think an obvious question is the proposed road allowance wide enough to even get a delivery truck in at the north end of the street, or the north end of the property? I think that's an obvious one. Long-term costs, which have already been brought up, I think is another question. And to Councillor Thompson's point, if we're talking about long-term viability of the site, and we aren't always using cars, well, if we move towards one option, you know, is there an opportunity for even further development 35, 40 years down the road with one of these options? I'm not swayed completely by the argument with deliveries, because if a delivery truck has to come in and make their delivery, unless we're hiring those staff members ourselves, I see them continuing to make those deliveries to where they need to make the deliveries. If that's wrong, again, by next Tuesday, I hope to have that information. Initially, I like the option of having a raised deck that everyone would be able to see and look up on. I think that makes sense from an aesthetic standpoint, but as we were talking about it more today, I think there's a little bit more usable space if we were to go down and look at the lower option. I'll vote in favor of this currently because I do think that we need to be moving forward on this, and I think the options that they presented and the actual designs of other communities where they've adopted something like this make sense. I think it's a direction we should all want to move forward in. I'm still sort of leaning towards option one. So I hope to have those questions answered so that I can make a final decision next week.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to confirm through you to Mr. Ramuno, in addition to those other questions that and statistics that we wanted for next week, if it hasn't already been said, I think it was said about AODA compliant in terms of what that range is. You know, that's certainly paramount in terms of any facility we built on that property. And also through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno, how applicable is any alterations to the library or to the front of the library if we went with the raised option? Would it be DC eligible? I know the communication the library board stated offered or recommended using some of the allotted DC funds for any costs to bear on this build. So if you could comment on that, that'd be great.
Mr. Ramuno.
To you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll need Mr. Elliott to confirm, but I think that may be a possibility with respect to the development charge reserve fund that we have for the library, future expansion of the library services. So I think that is a possibility, but I'll have that confirmed for next week by Mr. Elliott. Okay.
And if you could confirm maybe realistic amounts that could be applied as well, I think that would help in some of our decision making. You know, contrary to Councillor Abel's comments, and you know, with respect, I think the gem of the block is really the land between the library and the cultural center and what it will turn out to be. When I first looked at both designs, you know, first I was in favor of the raised option because it seemed like you get everything, all the benefits of the second, and you leave the library whole and they don't have to change anything, and none of the services are interrupted. But then when I took a lot more closer look at it, you know, I think about, you know, who's this square serving? And it's not for the cultural center, it's not for the library, although they're important partners to that square. It's all the residents of Aurora. And in order for it, you know, it has to be practical space. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. it has to be pleasing enough that people want to come in and create traffic. And ultimately, when you have more traffic in the square, it's going to ultimately benefit the library and the cultural center because they're there to increase their human footprint. And I think any increase in foot traffic will do that. That said, certainly, they're important partners, and we want to do everything we can to accommodate. But the focus has to be on the practical purpose and the getting traffic there. And in terms of parking, I know people from Bathurst to Bayview, and human behaviors change when the environment changes. We can't just suit to people's comforts and what they're used to, and certainly we have to look at accessibility. When I talk about the normal, able person who just want to be dropped off, I've dropped off my kids, or I walk, actually. So I'm not so fussed about the parking, and the parking is there, whether it's a 5-meter walk or a 25-meter walk. I don't see that as a huge issue. It's really the functionality and the aesthetics is the important thing. Until I get the information back next week, I don't think I can make a firm decision, but I'll be happy to go along with the recommendation for today, knowing that nothing's ratified until next week in council.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Any other speakers to the motion on the floor? Mayor Daw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And notwithstanding the fact that I moved it, I'm similar to Councillor Perry. I'm ambivalent in terms of the choices, so I'm looking for some of those answers.
And your point of personal privilege is?
Sorry, through Mayor Daw's comment, it gave the inference that I am ambivalent. I think there's a very big difference between ambivalence and not having made up my mind. So I'd ask that the mayor retract those statements, because I think words are important, and there is a big difference between those two words.
Mayor Daw, perhaps you can just clarify whether you were implying that. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So I'm looking for those answers so that I can come to a better conclusion. Some of the comments, I don't see that the laneway across the top of the library as being a viable option as a delivery, a route for a van, unless we're going to small vans, that kind of thing. So I still think there are some questions to be answered, and I'm looking forward to those answers next week. I will certainly support the recommendation on the floor because I think it gets us at least talking and moving in the right direction. And my apologies to Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while I'm overall supportive of this design, don't take my negative vote on this to be that. I'm preferring at this point option 1. If this goes through, I will continue and decide over the week through more feedback from residents and staff and other members of the public and my peers. But what I don't want anyone to misunderstand is that I'm totally in support of this. And at the end of the day, if option 2 is what is endorsed, the majority of council, I will be supporting it. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've, in my mind, approved both options several times. But with respect to option 1, unless the area under the parking that's raised now, unless that area was excavated so that we could have the drive-through that we enjoy now, and I don't know how much that would cost. I need to think on it. I would like to ask, though, about the DCs. Oh, you're back.
Mr. Elliott, there's been some questions regarding DCs and whether this project would be eligible either for the library DCs or the town's general DCs. Have you had a chance to look into that question?
The expansion of the interior space of the cultural center would be eligible for DCs because it's community space. Unfortunately, outdoor cultural type space is not DC eligible.
So just to be clear, you were saying that, so the future building could be DC eligible, but the plaza or space would not?
If it's general community use, if it's designated cultural space like a museum, for example, it's not DC eligible, the building itself. The outdoor space also, because of its cultural nature, is not DC eligible.
Thank you. Councilor Carter?
Thank you, and perhaps you can clarify this for me. I did try and call you earlier in the day. But when we built the library and we have a debt, and I'm assuming it's an internal debt that we self-financed. So all of the DC money that we collect has to go to us to pay back the debt, the construction debt for the library. So that would have to be done first before we could take any money and use it for any kind of a build or rebuild.
Councilor Carter, it's a little outside of this, but Mr. Elliott, do you have a quick answer?
It's in the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, the internal debt is on an amortization schedule, and so a fixed amount is in the budget each year for the debt repayment for the library, and it is sourced from library DCs that we collect today. The excess of what we collect versus what we have paid towards that remains available for library expansion of capital facility. Does that help?
A bit. I'll speak to you later.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion on the floor? Councilor Marakis, just under the bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're all in agreement that we're sensitive to the library's concerns, but I think what we also are in agreement, I think around the table from what I hear from the comments, is that we agree that we like what's being presented in front of us. So there is a bit of a wow factor in what we're seeing, and I think regardless of what this council decides, whether it's option 1 or option 2, I think at the end of the day, we as a group are going to make a decision of what we feel is in the best interest of the community as a whole. And I think that we're all waiting to get some further information, and I think next week we will make that decision. And so I'm looking forward to getting that more information and have a fulsome discussion around the table with my colleagues and making that final decision where we go from concept to reality. So.
Councilor Gardner for a second time.
Thank you. I did forget something. The mayor's concept of maybe carving out another lane. We do have a very good ramp at the front of the library, and it would be perfect if we could have some accessible parking there.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Any further questions? Before I call the vote, I just want to confirm through Mr. Natarazi and Mr. Ramuno, you've taken notes, you've noted all of the questions that council would like to follow up on. You're confident that you can get us the answers?
Yes, we will.
Perfect.
For next week.
Then I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? Opposed? It carries. Absolutely. Everybody knows GC, that's just a recommendation going forward. Mr. Ramuno, Mr. Natarazi will provide answers, and you may see people change their mind. They may reinforce their decision. However it works, it will next week will be the decision. Council, I'm going to ask, before this meeting started, I knew we might run long with the first 2 items. I did ask Mr. Natarazi to prioritize the remaining items on the agenda. The next one we would like to get dealt with is R15, which are the budget measures. If I can get a motion from someone on the floor to move R15 forward. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Marakis, all in favor? Can you please put R15 up? Thank you. Any speakers to the report? Sorry. That was to move it. Humphreys and Maracas just moved it forward. Would somebody care to put the budget on the floor? Mayor Daw, Councillor Gardner. Any speakers? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, Councillor Gardner.
Okay, now if anybody speaks after me, they're in trouble. I'm looking at page 3, and I'm thinking that with the aquatics program revenues and the youth program revenues, I'm thinking that staff spent a lot of time coming up with these figures, and it's based on historical evidence. And so I'm not comfortable with just, going from 773,000 to 707. Sorry, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We're going up $30,000. And, I'm assuming that staff presented us with figures originally that were doable. So.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I'll go to Mr. Naderoff.
And nobody knows anyway, so.
Mr. Naderoff.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. And this explanation will be for all the items with the exception of the elimination of the citizen budget survey. But all the items on that chart, basically the process that we followed was between the time that the budget was, for all intents and purposes, drafted, which was in September, in terms of these operational numbers, and now we have the benefit of a third quarter report for 2017. That report, as you will see next week, is showing us with some surpluses. And so what we endeavored to do was look at the surpluses that were being presented in 2017. We went back and looked at 2016 actual numbers as well and compared those surpluses. And where we saw a pattern of surpluses, we took a conservative approach and allowed for some of that difference to be suggested as a modification to the budget. So in the case of pretty much all of these, the variance is actually larger than what we're proposing here, but to be safe, we're taking a portion and we feel very confident that it's an acceptable modification of the budget based again on 2016 final and 2017 year to date.
We should do that every year, Mr. Naderoff. Well, and with the citizen budget, it hasn't been very successful. Is that why we're thinking of eliminating? I think maybe some of the citizens are not going to.
Ms. Mackenzie Smith, if you like.
Ms. Mackenzie Smith.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, apologies. I'm also ill, so my voice is kind of coming and going. Yeah, I think, we realized, this year, despite our best efforts, I feel that I wasn't personally satisfied with the response, and I feel that the Finance Advisory Committee felt the same. And, we certainly want to continue to engage the public on that matter, but would look at much cheaper or free alternatives for us to be able to do that.
Councillor Gardner.
Good, thank you.
Anyone want to risk the wrath of Councillor Gardner? Any other comments or questions? No. Oh, Councillor Maracas. No. Seeing nothing further, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll now move back to R2. Would someone care to put the recommendation on the floor for the year-end surplus deficit financial control bylaw? Mayor Daw. Councillor Perry. Comments or questions? Seeing none. Councillor Gardner.
And through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, I had the same or a similar question with respect to the reserve fund for the library development charges debt repayment. So I'm going to speak to Mr. Elliott after the meeting or tomorrow. I may raise it next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. R3, creation of additional reserve funds. Would somebody care to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Maracas? Councillor Kim for a change. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. R4. Would someone care to put the motion on the floor for the cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes under section 357, 358 of the Municipal Act? Councillor Gardner, Mayor Daw. Speakers. Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Everybody's worn out from the earlier conversations, I guess. R5, interim property tax levy. Who would like to put the tax levy on the floor? Councillor Kim. We need a seconder. Councillor Maracas. Any comments or questions about the interim property tax levy? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. R6, purchase order increase for Simcoe Refrigeration Division. Would someone care to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Gardner. Need a seconder? Councillor Humphreys. Comments or questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's going to be the same with the others. Why do we have such an increase? I know that it's, I'm just going to say that. Why do we have such an increase? Through you to Mr. Elliott, Mr. Downey. Who's grabbing
It
the
looks like
mic?
Mr. Downey is anxious to answer because he feels a little left out this evening. All the questions have been directed to somebody else. Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a requirement of our procurement bylaw. Anytime a purchase order gets past the $100,000, we have to get council approval to increase the purchase order. So this is money that we need allocated for 2018 purchase order, and that takes us over the $100,000 limit. Therefore, we need to come forward to council and ask for the increase.
I think Councillor Gardner was also asking why there was an increase from 90 to 150. It seemed a substantial increase.
There isn't actually an increase because this is a multi-year contract, and it's a condition of the process that we're in, that if I have a multi-year contract in the initial year, if it's below 100,000, I don't need it. As I increase it, and I'm not asking for any more money in one year than another, once I hit a $100,000 threshold, I need to report to council.
Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. R7, the award of RFP for the maintenance, emergency response, sanitary lift, and water boost stations. Would somebody care to move that? Mayor Dahl will move that. Councillor Maracas will second it. Comments or questions? Who wants to know more about sanitary lift and water boost stations? Next week, okay. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. HVAC services. Purchase order increase. Who would like to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Kim. Mayor Daw. Any comments or questions with regards to this purchase order? Nope. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We're going so fast, our CAO can't even keep up. R9. Purchase order increase for supply and delivery of waterworks and sewer materials. Who would like to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Maracas. Councillor Humphreys seconds it. Or she was just scratching her face. I'm not sure which one it was, but I'll take that. Any comments or questions? Nope. All in favor? So moved. R10. Whew, another RFP. Procurement was busy this week. Would somebody care to, Councillor Perry will put that motion on the floor, seconded by Councillor Maracas. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. R11, Shepherd's Bush Property Use and Maintenance Agreement. Who would like to move the motion? Councillor Perry, seconded. Mayor Daw? Comments or questions? All those in favor? Carried. Whew. R12, Facility Sponsorship Program, Bionics. Mayor Daw, did you want to move this one? Great. Seconded? And Councilor Gardner. Yes, you were both there. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. R13, Arboretum Community Partnership Agreement. Who'd like to move that? Councilor Perry? Councilor Gardner? Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's great. I would just put C1 on the floor. Can I put C1 on the floor, please? There was a request to defer this one. Motion to defer this one to a future date. Sure, January. Sounds good, since that's our next real meeting. All those in favor of the deferral? Deferral? Carried. Okay. That completes those items. We have no notice of motions during general committee. So now, new business. May I start with you, Councilor Perry?
I don't have any new business tonight. Do we want to talk about? I'm having a break, so yeah, seniors moment. Thank you. So Councilor
Already?
Marcus hopefully can remind me what we were talking about yesterday.
I'll take that as a no. Councilor Kim, new business?
Yes, just a question to our, can I say resident senior? Seeing that you were pointing at...
Either that or the senior resident.
To Mr. Downey, I noticed that there's a lot of mailboxes, community mailboxes that are, because of the frost and heave over the springtime, they're kind of leaning backwards now because of ground giving way. Who can we contact from the town to Canada Post, because they look after those things? Like, can we contact them to see if they can kind of straighten those mailboxes sometime?
Is that, Mr. Ramuno seems anxious to answer this one.
To you, Mr. Chair, it's Canada Post's responsibility for those boxes. We can certainly, we have a contact, we can certainly touch base with them tomorrow and see if they can get out there and rectify any of the problems with some of those mailboxes throughout town. But I will investigate and make the appropriate calls.
I believe Canada Post likes to hear from the town of Aurora. Councillor Humphreys.
Come back to me.
I can
I'm
come
just looking
back
for
to
a
you,
date.
sure.
Thank you.
Mayor Dawn, new business. Councillor Gardner.
No.
Councillor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll bring up one of the items from our Environmental Advisory Committee that we just had. There was some conversation around the table. We just dealt with the corporate environmental action plan, and some of the conversation around that is that it would be great where our reports, how they state how it's linked to the strategic plan, and maybe we could have an item line in there where it says that how this report or item is linked to the corporate environmental action plan as well, and we could have that listed in there, whether it's none or whether it is something. And I think it was unanimous around the table that we all felt that would be an excellent addition to our reports moving forward. I think it would keep us accountable in moving environmental initiatives forward.
I'd even expand it and say that there's a few other departmental master plans or certain plans that maybe it is good to have those links on the report. So good point. Mr. Nadarozny, can you take that back? Perfect. Councillor Humphries, do you?
I was looking for something that's not new business. It was an event, so I'll do that another time. But in terms of just through you, Mr. Chair, like there's been some graffiti things going on in town, and it just seems to be like they're coming up again. I know that there was someone, a councillor, and that has sort of led sort of a graffiti kind of. How do we deal with that,
councillor?
I think we know that councillor, and just wondering. Do we need to look at that program again and wonder what we can, is any comment from staff on that? Because maybe there's a proactive way to address it like we did back then. Just, I'm noticing it a lot more. Maybe my eyes are peeled for it now because of all the things that are going on, but any suggestions?
Maybe this is
Mr.
an
Chair?
opportunity to welcome Tasha into the conversation.
Oh, Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Tasha, can you provide
Been a
any
long night.
context? It is from the 2006-2010 term of council that Councillor Humphries is referring to.
Thank you. I do recall that ad hoc working group. I would have to, bylaw was not under my direction at the time, so I'd have to do a little bit of investigation and research and possibly come back with some ideas on how we might resurrect some type of working group.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be perfect. Thank you. Not to reinvent the wheel or cause a lot of new work, but if there's information that was quite successful, and maybe we can think about that again before it gets. And then just one other thing, it's something I ask every once in a while, and I'm sorry, Ms. Vellen, I meant to ask you about it, but the community improvement plan, and there's that one home on Young and Kennedy that just waiting for them to do something. It looks like it's getting worse and worse. I'm really worried. You know how that goes. I don't know if there's anyone been out there. I'm sorry, Mr. Ramuno. I'd like to look at the condition. Now it has a metal roof, so that kind of protects it. You can't get hopefully too bad. But I just wondered, what the status is there, or if someone can follow up. No need to worry about it, but just because I'm worried about that one. It's a nice, beautiful home, so.
I'll let
Heritage.
you take it offline with staff and
Thanks.
communicate back to you. Perfect.
That's it.
Any questions for our town solicitor? She's the only one that has been left out this evening. No, she's quite fine. Okay. That concludes new business. Motion. Yes, certainly. Does Mayor Dodd, would you like to just make this exception and make the public announcement for tomorrow night, just to remind people? No, I'll do it. You do it.
I'm on. I'm sorry. I was looking for my name up there. I didn't press the button. I don't know why. But we do indeed have our Christmas tree lighting tomorrow night at 6:30 right here at Town Hall. 6:30 to 8:30. Mrs. Claus will be at the Senior Center reading stories. There will be reindeer. And rumor has it that Santa may be showing up. So I would definitely come out.
And I believe that this year it'll even be expanded. We have our mini Christmas market as well. And
Indeed,
I'm hearing that we may very well have Niagara College back tomorrow night as well. So there'll be opportunity for members of the public to meet and talk with them, right?
Not only that, but Niagara College will be sampling some of the food that they do. So
Sampling or bringing samples? Because if they're eating it all themselves, I'm not very happy.
to be perfectly clear, they will be bringing samples for us to try.
I hear it's Christmas dinner on a bun. It's quite an interesting
And they make it
item.
all.
Yeah. Anything else? Oh, look at this now. Everybody's on it. Councillor Gardner.
So I would like to know, first of all, what time that's going to be served? No. Can you please find out?
6:30 to
7?
You realize it's first. I'm pretty sure it's first
Can we
come,
find
first
out,
serve
please?
basis.
And the other thing is, a resident asked me, with a small child, what time is the actual tree lighting? Like, or maybe Rick knows.
20 to 7. About that.
Is it? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you. I was reminded what I had forgotten. Request to the mayor, if allowed. We were chatting about anti-idling last night at the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting. We thought a great step would be for our illustrious mayor to write
Illustrious?
I'm just trying to think, not threatening letters, But letters advising groups such as Go Transit about the negative effects of idling their trains, or local grocery stores, again, about the negative effects of idling while they're doing deliveries. And I'm sure we can look at a cost model as well to demonstrate how much money they're actually wasting in addition to the negative effects. To write just a quick letter letting them know what they're doing has some negative impacts. The school, stock transportation as well, any transportation agencies as well, letting them know about the downsides of idling and what that can do. So if the mayor wanted to do that, we promised that we'd make that request.
Chat further on that.
After all those kind words, how could you turn down that request?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Mayor Daw, Councilor Maracus, all in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And that concludes my duties as chair for this term.